Disclosure.
It is 9 o'clock in the East, and polls have just closed in 15 more states. We're going to begin here in battleground state of Arizona, where Democratic Senator Mark Kelly and Republican venture capitalist Blake Masters are in a very tight race.
Over to Wisconsin, incumbent Republican Senator Ron Johnson, Democratic Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, also locked in a very close race in Wisconsin.
In Colorado, also too early to call here, but incumbent Democratic Senator Michael Bennet leads at this point. Republicans believe that Joe O'Dea, who is a local business owner, an independent type Republican, has a good chance to take that seat. We're watching.
We can project that in Iowa, Republican Senator Chuck Grassley has a solid lead in his Senate race. If Grassley wins re-election, he would become the longest-serving sitting senator.
In New York, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer will win his 5th term in office. No surprise there.
Meanwhile, in Kansas, we're projecting that GOP Senator Jerry Moran will win his 3rd term in office.
North Dakota, we can project that Republican Senator John Hoeven has the lead, but we do not have enough data yet to make that call.
And Republican Senator John Thune has won re-election in South Dakota. As we take a look at a balance of power in the Senate, we are ticking down here. Democrats with 39, Republicans with 34. Again, the majority 51. Republicans, again, holding those seats in Florida, and we're looking at Ohio, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina, but they're looking to pick up seats a number of places throughout the country.
We're going to see those numbers fill in, and then we're going to see White just that sits there for a really long time in the middle of the Senate. So let's take a look at this in New York. This has become a really closely watched race because of the crime issue in New York. The incumbent, Kathy Hochul, has a lead at this point against Lee Zeldin. I mean, there was a time not too long ago where nobody thought this was going to be even close, but he has really given her a run for her money. So we will see how this all goes, but that's where it stands at this point.
In Arizona, another high-profile contest. It's too early to call the race between Democratic Secretary of State Katie Hobbs and Republican Kari Lake.
Let's go to Michigan, where Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer has a slight lead. That race is too close to call.
And in Wisconsin, the race between Governor Tony Evers and his opponent Tim Michels, the Republican, too early to call there. Just like in the Senate, another very tight race.
Texas, our decision desk believes that Republican Governor Greg Abbott has a lead, but that one's also too early to call.
In Kansas, Republican challenger Derek Schmidt and Democratic Governor Laura Kelly are locked in a very tight race. Democrats had a lot of hopes about Kansas.
In Minnesota, the governor's race, Democratic incumbent Tim Walz has a lead against his Republican challenger, Scott Jensen.
And in New Mexico, not enough data yet to call this race. This is a showdown between the Democratic incumbent, Michelle Lujan Grisham, and Republican candidate, Mark Ronchetti.
And to the Rocky Mountains and in Colorado, incumbent Governor Jared Polis will defeat GOP candidate Heidi Ganahl.
In South Dakota, not enough data to project the winner of the governor's race between incumbent Kristi Noem and Democratic challenger Jamie Smith, but Noem does lead at this hour.
Let's go to Iowa, where we can project that Republican incumbent Kim Reynolds will return to the governor's mansion for a 2nd term.
And in Nebraska, Republican Jim Pillen is in the lead. Again, too early to call.
Finally, in Wyoming, where there are a lot of disgruntled people, apparently, according to our Fox News voter analysis, we're projecting that Republican Governor Mark Gordon will cruise through to another term where he beats Democratic candidate Teresa Livingston.
Okay, another deep breath. Let's bring back the panel. And we welcome in back again Josh Kraushaar and Jessica Tarlov. How are you?
Hi, great.
Looking great in purple. Your thoughts on the evening?
Not so bad so far for Democrats, which is relieving thus far. Obviously, a long way to go. I've been paying attention, kind of looking for clues about how the Democratic strategy of emphasizing January 6th and abortion is going to play out versus what's going on with the economy. A little bit of results in with the Kentucky measure there about abortion, where it looks like they're going to go the same way as Kansas. But that's kind of my focal point there. I really liked what Harold Ford was talking about with Tim Ryan, when you had Jared Polis up there, who's also won his race already, you know, looking to Democrats who can be examples for how you can run effective races in purple places, and, you know, make an appealing argument on the economy, but also be left-leaning on social issues, but not feel like pariahs.
But let me ask you this. If the House, as projected, goes to the Republicans, and the Senate's very tight, and maybe it goes to Republicans, maybe it stays the same, do you think that message is the one they're going to take away from this election?
I worry no. I think that there will be a lot of people who said, oh, well, we got this right, when in the end, you really got lucky. There is a way to thread the needle on multiple fronts. You should never be a candidate that's only talking about one thing or one or two things that, frankly, are ranking well below the other thing that people are saying that they're concerned about. I think that people may have been able to change course in the last couple of weeks and pull it off, like a Kathy Hochul, for instance, here. But if you listen to people like Elisa Slotkin, who's in a tough race in Michigan there, when she says we didn't have a cohesive economic message as a party, that's something that you take home, especially going to a presidential election when President Biden is going to have to defend his record over the 4 years.
Josh, let's take a look at Ohio again, because more numbers are coming in those races that we have talked about a lot in 2, 7, and 10. And we're seeing, as we get more vote there, and maybe Bill can pull that up for us as well while we talk about it, that there's a very nice spread for Yesli Vega and also for the candidate who is running against against Luria,
You're talking about Virginia.
Jennifer Kagan.
Virginia.
Jennifer, yeah, in Virginia. Did
You
I say
said
Ohio?
Ohio.
I'm
That's
sorry.
right. He's going to
I'm
Virginia.
sorry, Virginia.
He's got it.
Okay, so we have two really interesting races here, Spanberger and Vega, and then we have Luria and Jennifer Kagan, who, you know, the Republicans have been enormously enthusiastic about as a candidate, and she seems to be doing quite well.
Yeah, in Virginia, like these states that don't have a Senate race, that don't have a big governor's race, Republicans are doing really well. I'm seeing a mixed bag politically. Huge night for Republicans in Florida. This is a political tsunami for Governor DeSantis, for Senator Rubio. I think.
You know what, Josh, we're going to jump in because DeSantis has just come out to give his acceptance speech. Let's watch a little bit of this.
Well, thank you so much. You know, over these past 4 years, we've seen major challenges for the people of our state, for the citizens of the United States, and above all, for the cause of freedom. We saw freedom in our very way of life and so many other jurisdictions in this country wither on the vine. Florida held the line. We chose facts over fear. We chose education over indoctrination. We chose law and order over rioting and disorder. Florida was a refuge of sanity when the world went mad. We stood as a citadel of freedom for people across this country and indeed across the world. We faced attacks. We took the hits. We weathered the storms, but we stood our ground. We did not back down. We had the conviction to guide us, and we had the courage to lead. We made promises. We made promises to the people of Florida, and we have delivered on those promises. And so today, after 4 years, the people have delivered their verdict. Freedom is here to stay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, thanks to the overwhelming support of the people of Florida, we not only won election, we have rewritten the political map. Thank you for honoring us with a win for the ages. I want to thank all of our campaign staff, from campaign manager Janera Peck down. This was the best run campaign in the history of Florida politics. I want to thank all of our wonderful volunteers who worked so hard to get out the vote. Your support means the world to Casey and I. God bless you and thank you. Now, it's a lot easier to run a good campaign when you got a great record to run on. And I would not have been able to see the level of accomplishments that we saw unless I had outstanding personnel working in the executive office of the governor, as well as heading state agencies. These folks worked hard to implement our agenda. They believed in our agenda, and the results have been historic. Thank you for your support and work. Thank you to Miami-Dade County. Thank you to Palm Beach County. Now, we're still tallying the votes, but it's clearly apparent that this election, we will have garnered a significant number of votes from people who may not have voted for me 4 years ago. And I just want to let you know, I am honored to have earned your trust and your support over these 4 years. And most important of all, thank you to the greatest First Lady in all 50 states, for being a great wife, giving unwavering support, being a tremendous mother to our 3 young children, and serving as an example for women throughout this state, especially going through the battle of cancer. She is remarkable. Now, today, is the culmination of the 2022 fall elections, but in reality, Americans have been voting for many years now. They've been voting with their feet, and the results of that behavior has been just as stark as our landslide victory today. States and cities governed by leftist politicians have seen crime skyrocket. They've seen their taxpayers abused. They've seen medical authoritarianism imposed, and they've seen American principles discarded. The woke agenda has caused millions of Americans to leave these jurisdictions for greener pastures. Now, this great exodus of Americans, for those folks, Florida, for so many of them, has served as the promised land. We have embraced freedom. We have maintained law and order. We have protected the rights of parents. We have respected our taxpayers, and we reject woke ideology. We fight the woke in the legislature. We fight the woke in the schools. We fight the woke in the corporations. We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. Florida is where woke goes to die. People have come here because our policies work. Leadership matters. We refuse to use polls and put our finger in the wind. Leaders don't follow, they lead. We set out a vision, we executed on that vision, and we produced historic results. And the people of this state have responded in record fashion. Now, while our country flounders due to failed leadership in Washington, Florida is on the right track. I believe the survival of the American experiment requires a revival of true American principles. Florida has proved that it can be done. We offer a ray of hope that better days still lie ahead. I am proud of our achievements in this state. I am honored by your support, and I look forward to the road ahead. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race in this first term, and I have kept the faith. We've accomplished more than anybody thought possible 4 years ago, but we've got so much more to do, and I have only begun to fight. God bless you all. Thank you very much. Thank you for a historic landslide victory.
Ron DeSantis, the major winner, winning re-election for governor in Florida. Britt, do you want to weigh in about other things?
Well, I would say that he sees this as a moment. He knows what the consequences of this is politically, not just in the state of Florida, but for his own personal ambitions. And I think that's pretty well reflected in what you heard him say there.
And there you see the family was a big part of the campaign. His wife went through a battle of cancer, and former TV broadcaster herself, and a big asset on that campaign. Ron DeSantis winning in places that other Florida governors have not won as Republicans since Jeb Bush in 2002. Now, we've got some calls to make. In the first of the two Oklahoma Senate races this year, Fox News can project that GOP Senator James Lankford will win a second full term in office.
And in the special election, we project that Republican Markwayne Mullin will defeat Democrat Kendra Horn.
Moving to Connecticut, where Democratic Senator, the incumbent Richard Blumenthal, wins the third term by defeating Republican businesswoman Leora Levy.
Over to Texas and the governor's race, where we can now project that Governor Greg Abbott will remain in the governor's mansion for a third term. He defeats high-profile Democratic candidate Beto O'Rourke. A lot will be
Leave
said.
it there for 1
a
second.
lot will be said about this this race, because this is multiple efforts on the part of Beto O'Rourke.
Multiple efforts and multiple tens of millions of dollars, and a lot of focus on Beto O'Rourke as a candidate. Britt?
O'Rourke is becoming the Charlie Crist of Texas.
Yes, exactly.
I'm sorry, but I don't know who you're talking about. The Democratic candidate was
Robert
Robert Francis O'Rourke, and not that other phony name.
Yeah, I mean, he's gone from the cover of Vanity Fair magazine and this shining hope of the Democrat Party. Jessica, your thoughts on what has happened to Beto O'Rourke? Does this seal the deal? Is he done now in politics or not?
Never say never with these things, but I think if the evening goes as I expect it to for Stacey Abrams as well, that there's going to be a lot of soul searching about, where you're dumping your money when you go on Act Blue, right? There are a lot of people whose races are a lot closer than you would expect, like Sherry Beasley in North Carolina. I'm not saying that she's going to end up pulling that off, but when you think about where your dollars could go, that maybe that extra money going to Maggie Hassan, it looks better than expected there in New Hampshire. Defending Nevada, things like that, giving more money in Pennsylvania, maybe to Tim Ryan, who had to go it alone without Chuck Schumer's support at the end there. And, these are celebrity candidates. I think that there have been incredible messaging moments that kind of have rallied the Democratic base and made you really focus on the issues that matter to us as a party. But they are seemingly just not great candidates to win statewide office, and I hope people will take stock of that.
Okay, we can also project that Democratic Governor Dan McKee will win the first full term in office, defeating another GOP businesswoman, Ashley Klaus.
And over to Connecticut, where Democrat incumbent Ned Lamont will defeat GOP candidate Bob Stefanowski.
And finally, in the great state of New Hampshire, we can project that Republican Governor Chris Sununu will win a fourth term. And Dana, he's been on the show with you a number of times, with you and Bill. He also possibly has other ambitions.
Well, he might. So there was a heavy attempt to recruit him to run for the Senate in New Hampshire, and he didn't want to do that. And I can understand, when he had been governor, you are the executive of your state, you're the CEO of your state. He loves New Hampshire, and he thought, why would I want to go to Washington and be one of 100 and not get anything done? He wanted to sink his teeth into things. I don't know if he actually has ambition to run for president, but of course, that decision doesn't need to be made for a little while, unless we're talking sooner than later with Britt.
Britt, but you mentioned Sununu earlier and how it plays with that Senate race and whether it affects that.
It does. Well, it should. I mean, when you get these Republican governors winning by decisive margins, the hope, if you're a Republican, is that they will pull across the finish line some of these embattled candidates for the Senate who are in really tight races. You see that in Georgia, you see that in Florida, or not so much in Florida, but you certainly see it in New Hampshire, and you see it elsewhere. Mike DeWine, for example, in Ohio, how much can he help J.D. Vance to get across the finish line in what appears to be a pretty tight race out there?
And we'll see what happens in Arizona as well with Kari Lake and Blake Masters. Okay, let's head over to Bill Hemmer. And
Hey, guys.
this is your favorite, Virginia.
We're going to look at
yes.
Virginia.
Yeah, let me
Get an
just
update.
pop up here a moment here. We were talking about North Carolina a moment ago. I was just checking Ted Budd is taking the lead here. But let's pop up here to the House races in Virginia. Thanks for being patient. Okay, here we go. Virginia 2. Jen Kiggins, you got about 60% of the vote. And she's got a lead here of 19,000 raw votes, about 11% on the board. So she continues to, I mean, we saw this, about an hour and a half ago, she took the lead. She's maintained that lead in Virginia, too. They like that run there. Virginia 7, closer to Washington, D.C. This is Spanberger's race with Yesli Vega. What I've seen, guys, is this race is getting closer throughout the night. We still got some vote out there right now, but Vega continues to hang on to a lead with the difference of about 6,300 there in Virginia. Can I show you a couple things in the Senate race here that I'm seeing? Let's pop down here to Georgia and watch what's happening with Warnock and Walker. Warnock, about 30 minutes ago, had gone below 50%. He popped up again. Remember, 50% in Georgia is where you need to be to avoid the runoff come 4 weeks from now. And Kemp in the governor's race, he has been pretty consistent from what I'm seeing, well above 50% now for, or really, I guess, ever since the polls closed 2 hours ago. So Kemp is running at 51.6. Walker's running at 47.1. So again, it's about that 4-point spread that you see between Walker and between Kemp. Let me get out here.
Hey, one thing, Bill.
Yes, go ahead.
There's a Libertarian in that race, in the Senate race, that's getting 3 times the vote of the Libertarian in the governor's race in Georgia. I mean, I don't know if that factors in, but there is a difference there.
Yeah, and it could take some votes away, and we're going to see. I can't reflect that on the board behind but listen, a point could be significant, right? Can I show you what's happening in Ohio before I kick it back over there real quick? Here is Ohio. Here is Ryan and Vance. Guys, we got a race here. This is really interesting. I mean, it's a different race than what we saw about 15 minutes ago. Vote total of 23,000. Here's what I would think about. I would think about Cuyahoga County. 3-1 Democrats in that county. Ryan's got more votes out there in Cleveland, Ohio. I would think about Franklin County, Capital City, Columbus. Got a lot of votes out there, guys. You know, just about 30% in. Ryan's going to pick up a few more there. We'll see how that breaks down. And then down here in Hamilton County in Cincinnati is the east side of that county. There's a lot of votes out there, too, for Ryan in all likelihood because you're only checking in at 30%. But come back in a moment here, and I shall show you as it rolls on, okay? You bet.
Thank you, Bill. And Virginia 10 is tight, 51-48. Jennifer Wexton over Hung Cao. Biden won that by 18%. In 2020. So that's the margin in that race is something that we're watching closely to see what it indicates for the rest of these races across the country as well. Very big difference in that margin. So we're going to take a quick break, and we have Laura joining us when we come back. Laura Ingraham coming up.
Welcome back. It's starting to get hot. Getting got a lot of data. We're getting a lot of information.
A lot of piles.
We've got a lot of people. There are 2 notable contests playing out in Arizona, obviously, both too early to call. On the Senate side, Democratic Senator Mark Kelly trying to fend off a challenge from Republican Blake Masters, and Republican Kari Lake is taking on Katie Hobbs for governor. Alicia Acuna joins us now from the Lake campaign headquarters. Alicia, what's the feeling there?
Hi, Brett. Well, when the polls closed, things really started to fill up here. And I can tell you, even though the polls closed in Arizona at 7 p.m. local time, 9 o'clock Eastern, everyone is waiting for the top of the hour because that's when we get that first very large set of data from Maricopa County Elections Office. That's the first data dump, as they call it. And what we're going to see there is the vote count that was the early vote that went up to this past weekend. And so whatever margins you see at that time, they're going to change significantly an hour later, because that's when we will see the today votes start to come in and really roll in, and that's when those margins will start to move around. The reason that will happen is because Arizona, like so many other states, see Democrats turn out for the early vote and participate at a pretty high rate. Republicans, you mentioned Carrie Lake and Blake Masters, as part of their campaigns, they were trying to convince their voters, their base, to show up on Election Day. You saw those long lines today all over the state, and there are people who are still in line waiting to vote. Because of that, we will see a heavier presence from Republicans in terms of that vote return. So we will definitely keep you updated. I can also give you another update. The Republican Party, national, state, as well as the top of the tick candidates lost a last-minute bid this evening when they made had an emergency hearing with the Maricopa County judge to extend voting hours by another 3 hours because of glitches in the system in Maricopa County. That was denied. So expect to hear a little more from Republicans tonight as the evening goes on. Back to you.
Alicia Cunha at the Lake campaign headquarters. Alicia, thanks.
So that's a great idea to hear a little bit more about that. And Laura Ingraham joins us now. Hi, Laura.
Hey, guys.
Great to see you
What
tonight.
a panel. Look at this.
It's great to have you with us. You know, this Arizona race, and you said you were just listening to the arguments that were brought before the court to extend voting because of the problems that we heard about early this morning.
Yeah, 25% of the tabulation wasn't going according to plan,
That's a lot.
which is a lot of people. So the reports where people tried to go to other precincts to vote, and then they already were logged as having voted somewhere else, and so their votes didn't count. So that was not allowed by the judge to be extended as far as voting goes. But in Houston, they had other problems. In Houston, they did extend voting, so it was another set of facts. But it just brings to mind, again, this confusion about how votes are cast, when they're counted, when they're allowed to be postmarked. And I'm not saying I'm not in favor of federalizing elections, but every 2 years, we're going to have this problem. But we didn't have this problem really up until, what, 2016 is when we really started having big problems.
The Democrats who look at that and say, this is the bill, they go farther for other reasons. But is there a bill in between that says, here's a national standard that each state has to meet? Or something?
Yeah, well, we'll see how that goes. But I think Florida, I said this when I was with you guys on election night in 2020, Florida is still the model for the country, I think. The coalition of new voters, younger voters, Latino voters. We'll see where African-American voters turn out in Miami-Dade when it's really broken down. But this was a tour de force performance by Ron DeSantis and Marco Rubio. And to me, that is the great light for the Republican Party. And they know how to count votes, and they know how to tabulate absentee votes and mail-in ballots. So it can work. And it worked in 2020. And it seems to be working now for the Republicans. And the state has some certainty, which I think is so important for people's belief and trust in the system.
It's exactly right. And what happened in Florida was that they went through the hanging Chad experience, and they said never again.
Right.
We're going to fix this. So they open the ballots as they come in, and then they start processing those ballots. And if you live in Florida, you can trace your ballot.
Right.
On a website. Here's where yours is. We have it. It's been counted. You know, so why haven't they learned that lesson in places like Pennsylvania? I heard Carrie Lake today said, if I'm elected, we're going to clean this thing up and we're going to make sure that it works well.
I think you're going to see new Republicans propose that. And it's incumbent upon them to do this. Again, we talk about trust in elections and belief in democracy. It's so important that people in both parties really have faith in our system. And every 2 years, we're going to have this stagger effect in the election cycle. And I don't think it's good. I really don't. And we know how to do it.
They picked up 4 House races in Florida.
Yep.
Again, Republicans need 5 to take control of the House. We'll see how the rest of the country flows. But it's looking like it could be, anywhere from 15 to 30 seats in the House. But there's a disconnect, it seems, with the Senate races that are really tight, at least as we're looking at them right now. How do you see it?
Well, I think right now I'm watching what Zeldin's going to do in New York, because there could be as many as 5 House seats that flip out on Long Island. That is fascinating. And he might win, he might not win. But if he comes within 5 points of taking it from Hochul, that is really significant. But look, in the end of this cycle, whenever we cast the last votes, it could be, a mixed bag for some of the MAGA candidates. But look, this is the process. So you have to have, run great campaigns, and it's a complex electorate with a lot of issues that are bubbling out there. But I'm telling you, Carrie Lake was discounted. I was kind of for the other candidate, and she really turned out to run a great race in the end.
And we should point out, they could end up with 3 seats pick up in the Senate. It's early. And we don't know how these races are going to turn out in the end.
And again, Don Bolduc in New Hampshire, keep an eye on that. I mean, we don't know what will happen. Hassan is favored to win, but we don't know at this point. He could actually pull it out.
And as you point out, and we've been going through all of these voting rules for all of these states. There's so many states where they don't say, we're going to count the mail-in first.
Oh, it's tragic.
Then we're going to count the day of. Then we're going to go to our provisional ballots. This is the order that we do it in. So when you start getting this vote in, and I'm looking over your shoulder, Laura, and I'm seeing that things seem to be changing around in Ohio right now. That's the kind of thing that people don't, it fosters distrust in the system.
And I think also to the point that you were talking about like philosophy earlier, look, depending on what O'Day does in Colorado, if he loses by a bigger margin than some of the other more populist conservative candidates, that's something to take into account. I mean, if Mike Lee wins by a massive margin in Utah, that's a loss for Mitt Romney. So there's a divide in the party. The populists, I think, have the edge right now. But again, it's a long night ahead.
It is, and it's great to have you here.
Great to see you.
Joining us is Republican National Committee Chair Ronna McDaniel. Thanks so much for being here. Your initial impressions of tonight.
Well, I think it's going to be a long night. I think your analysis has been spot on, but I do think looking at Florida, where we were 4 years ago was in recount territory for Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis, both of them within 1%, and to see what we have seen tonight really is a seismic shift, and I think a lot of that's going to come from the Hispanic population. The RNC's had community centers in Miami-Dade for over a year. We've really engaged with the Hispanic population in Florida on top of voter registration efforts, coupled with the Florida GOP and the DeSantis team and Rick Scott and Marco Rubio. I think that's a huge, huge win. What's happening in Virginia looks really good, but we've got a long night to go. I'm very optimistic.
Ronna, what about the Senate races when you look at those tonight? What are your thoughts?
I think they're all going to be tight. We're seeing Clark County have some pretty good numbers for Republicans. We'll see if that holds. A lot of it's going to come down to Election Day vote. You look at Pennsylvania right now, all you're seeing right now is the absentee voting coming in. Democrats get a huge lead in Pennsylvania on absentee, and Republicans vote on Election Day. I was there this morning. And then Ted Budd, I think, is doing really well in North Carolina. He's going to pull that off. I think J.D., we have most of the absentee in Ohio. We're getting Election Day vote now. I think he's going to come up. It's going to be a tight night, and I think Georgia, Walker's doing well. It's going back and forth. But I think we end up picking up at least one seat in the Senate, flipping the Senate and the House.
We talked about the New York governor's race, and we said Lee Zeldin, he's going to be the first Republican to carry Staten Island in a governor's race since 2002. It's having an effect, obviously, the issues. When you look at the issues that played well for Republicans and ones where you think you lost a little ground in some of these races, how do you see it, Ronna?
Yeah, so I was in New York this week, actually, with Kevin McCarthy, campaigning for Anthony D'Esposito, George Santos, and that, Long Island area. I couldn't believe how many Zeldin signs there were, and we're hearing about really strong turnout in Suffolk and Nassau, but across the state, people were telling us we need Lee Zeldin, and the crime issue is so ever present on the mind of New Yorkers. And Lee, I think he can win, but I also think he's going to help us pick up House seats. Of course, we won't have results in New York because their voting laws, again, delay results. And I think what you said about Florida tonight is spot on. The rest of the country can get this right. And for the Democrats to say that Republicans aren't getting this right on elections, look at Florida and look at Ohio, very large states that we're going to get results from tonight because they know how to run elections, and that should be the model for the country. We shouldn't be having to wait weeks to get results like we probably will in New York.
Ron, a quick answer if you can. You said Pennsylvania. Did you say that all of the vote that we've seen so far, you're saying is all the mail-in vote, that they haven't started voting counting day of? Do you know that?
You're getting mostly mail-in right now. So they started processing the absentee votes at 7 a.m. this morning. So you're going to see this influx of mail-in votes, and then you're going to start seeing the election day vote come in. And that's where we're going to win. We knew we were going to go in with a deficit because of the absentee voting, and then we knew we had to win Election Day by close to 60%, which we did in 2021 with the Supreme Court race there. It's going to be tight. Trump won Pennsylvania in 2016 by 44,000 votes, and it's going to be within 1% either way. I think Oz has the momentum, and I was on the ground with him last night in Montgomery County. I feel really good, but it is going to be a very tight race.
Yes, it is. Ronna McDaniel, we appreciate your time.
So meantime, the battleground state of Georgia, home to two of tonight's biggest races for the Senate And for the State House, Lawrence Jones is in Central City at the Central City Tavern in Alpharetta, Georgia. Hi, Lawrence.
Hey, good evening, my friend. I want to say morning because I've been up since this morning here in Georgia. And the reason why we're here, guys, Martha, you know we've been doing these focus groups all across the country. We were here for the primary, and as you know, Brian Kemp was able to go against President Trump when it comes to his endorsement in that primary. And when you talk with the people, the reason why they went with Kemp is because they say they know the guy. They believe that he fought for them during COVID. He's good on the economy, gave them a deduction when it comes to the gas tax. And there's people here, right here, to tell me about Kemp. So tell me why you're supporting him tonight.
Brian Kemp, he's pro-business. Whenever the schools were shut down, Brian was the first person to lift the mask mandates. Brian helps Georgia and Georgians grow.
So tell me, there was this big race now between Warnock as well as Walker, and it's close, but it's not that close between Kemp. So tell me why that's the case here in Georgia.
Well, I think the Democrats ran a good campaign against Walker, but it's not a personality competition, and the whole country is relying on us, Georgians, to get this right.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, what's the #1 issue for you?
For me, it's the economy and inflation. Just the price of groceries and gas is, I'm a small business owner, and I drive every day for a living, and it's a lot.
It's getting tough. Thank you so much, ma'am. One lady I want you guys to talk to, because we've been talking a little bit. What's the #1 issue for you today?
It's the future of our country. It's my children's future. I have 2 teenage girls, and I'm concerned about what the future is going to be like for them. And I need to vote my conscience and vote the way that I feel will protect their future.
Thank you so much, ma'am. If you talk with voters, they will tell you also when it comes to the mudslinging between Walker and Warnock, and when it comes to women and all the allegation that has been out there, they say it's a wash because it looks like both candidates are dealing with the same thing. Ma'am, who are you going to vote for in this Senate race, or who did you vote for in this Senate race?
Herschel Walker.
And why did you decide to go with Walker, even though the mud was going back and forth?
You know, when it comes down to it, all things being equal, I'm a moderate Republican, and I'm voting policy. And go Dogs. I'm a UGA graduate, 1990.
A lot of Dogs fans here. Sir, who did you vote for and why?
I voted for Herschel Walker. You know, I didn't want someone who was going to just rubber stamp Biden all over again, you know, and his policies. And I think Herschel Walker's going to stand up for the state of Georgia and do what's right.
Thank you so much, sir. And guys, as y'all hear, you didn't hear anything about emotion. You didn't hear anything about Jim Crow 2.0. What you heard about are the issues that matter to them: the economy, education, crime. That's what matters to the folks of Georgia. It's been a great being here, guys. I'll send it back to you guys in New York.
Okay, Lawrence, thank you so much. Interesting to hear those voters. As Georgia, just really quickly over Laura's shoulder, looks like Kemp is pulling away.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, Kemp's above 53% right now, a difference of 206,000 raw votes. Not quite 2/3 of the vote in just yet statewide.
And what about the Senate race?
You know what's interesting about that, Brett, real quick, is that Kemp was a winner by about 55,000 votes 4 years ago. Right now, his margin's over 200,000. So see how that sticks here. Senate race now between Warnock. Well, okay, look at this. Wow. So we just changed yet again. I was looking at Warnock a moment ago. He's at 51.5. Now back down below 50% for the second time that we have checked this out. That's a dead heat right now in Georgia on that Senate race, Brett.
Laura, you have any thoughts to that?
Yeah, well, look, at this point, Kemp and DeSantis together, I think, stand as 2 leaders. They led on COVID. Remember,
well, you could say Abbott, too.
I mean, Abbott, too.
Yep,
but Kemp, remember, opened up his state of the states that were shut down before anyone else. He got a lot of criticism from Donald Trump at the time, and that kind of dissipated over a couple of weeks after that. But he opened up first, then DeSantis, and then you had this example of these Republican-run states that had life that was kind of back to normal. And meanwhile, you had all these kids in New York and New Jersey and Illinois and Michigan that were locked in, and they couldn't go to school, and they couldn't do sports, and they were getting mentally, affected by all this. And that drove people, like parents, nuts, crazy. And they ended up, a lot of them leaving states and going to these Republican-run states, I think parents have a long memory about what that COVID shutdown for schools did. I think Kemp and DeSantis, both on that. Abbott obviously already did fantastically tonight. All three of them really were bright, again, bright shining stars in the universe of Republican leaders.
See the ripples of that in Virginia
Exactly.
as well. And that's continuing from the Youngkin race, and now we're seeing it in these races there as well.
Exactly.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, one of several GOP candidates winning re-election. Obviously, he was a senator for re-election convincingly this evening. We will hear from him coming up.
And we are just minutes away from our next round of poll closings as Fox News Democracy 2022 continues. Okay, we're back, 9:45 on the East Coast. With that, we bring in our panel.
We're going to go to the FPN panel.
We're going to the FPN panel.
Yes.
I was like, I don't see Maria and Larry and Charles, and there they are. Hi, you guys.
Hello.
Great to have you with us. Larry, let's get your thoughts. We haven't heard from you. Well, we heard from you a little bit earlier tonight, but now what do you make of it?
It still looks to me like it's going to be a two-house sweep by the GOP, and I'm not going to call every race, but I think we're talking 51 or 52 seats in the Senate. I think the House is going away. And I just want to say it's absolutely essential if the Republicans control Congress, the first thing they do in order to help save the economy, get inflation down, and promote some supply-side growth is to take the shackles off of oil and gas and fossil fuels. Take the cuffs off. That stuff permeates every part of American life. We need the supply. We need to reduce prices. It'll help on the inflation front. It is the single most important thing. And if they do that, I think it'll be very bullish for the stock market, frankly. Very, very bullish.
Charles Payne.
You know, listening to Lawrence Jones and that last woman he spoke with, she talked about her teenage daughters. You know, we talk about what's on the ballot. I think what's on the ballot is what America wants to be, what it will be. And if you think about President Obama, for instance, who said there's no such thing as pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, almost every single thing that we're seeing right now is a repudiation of free money, of government being able to do what you should be doing for yourself. I know it's a wonky word, but modern monetary theory, they were going to make this a Main Street phrase. Just 2 months ago, Business Insider said, what is modern monetary theory? Understanding the alternative economic theory that's becoming more mainstream. They tried to make it mainstream. What did they do? Instead, we've had real wages that have been down every single month since that $1.9 trillion has gone into effect. 3.5% loss in real wages. By the way, compare that to President Trump. It was up 7%. Even President Obama was up 3%. We just learned on Monday, our credit card debt, $1.1 trillion. That's up 19% since the free money went into effect. What this election really is about is behind the scenes, you have two ideologies. One that believes that America can pull itself up by the bootstraps. The other one that's given up on America a long time ago, and that one is losing.
So, Maria, you know, with regard to what Larry said and turning up on the spigots, that's a hard turn for the president, who just 2 days ago was up on a stage saying that we're going to end all the drilling in this country.
Yeah.
So, you know, I can't imagine politically how you sort of turn that corner and suddenly say, well, you know, this obviously isn't working. We're going to give it a shot. It could come through legislation. I mean, I know Kevin McCarthy says he wants to make that a priority, but how would that work?
Well, I think that's the point of the night. You're right. Look, I think that he's not going to do that without a fight. But if you do see the leadership coming from the Republicans, that is exactly what you'll see. I think Larry used the right word in terms of shackles, taking the shackles off energy. But it's not just energy. It's the shackles of overregulation. And that goes throughout business. So that's certainly something that will get loosened up in a victory for the GOP. I think you've got a good news, bad news story playing out here tonight. The good news is that we are seeing some serious victories that will affect this climate change agenda. The Republicans will push back and they will try to expand fossil fuel business, and they will do whatever they can in terms of approving more leases, approving more business in the fossil fuel area. So that's a good news part of the story. Also good news is the fact that they will push back on the fiscal irresponsibility. And we will stop the out-of-control spending and the $5+ trillion in borrowing that has already occurred. The bad news part of this story is that a lot of damage has been done. And we are already looking at 2023 being a very tested and weak time for the economy. And you look at the stock market all the time, Charles. Let's look at some tech names. The major tech companies are trading down while the S&P 500 is trading up. What does that tell you? That tells you that you are looking at a weak holiday season to come. You are looking at an environment where we're going to see layoffs in technology. We are going to see a weaker period for tech. It also has to do with regulation. I'll just end with where we were earlier in the show when I mentioned the energy states. And when you look at states like Texas, Wyoming, Pennsylvania, Louisiana, West Virginia, Oklahoma, and North Dakota, that's where you want to see Republican wins. That's where you will see growth, because that is where oil is produced in this country.
But these election returns, which I still believe is a two-house sweep by the GOP, will amount to a repudiation of all the big government socialism undertaken by President Biden. And he will have to listen to those election returns. It may not be easy. My colleagues are correct on that. But I think at some point he's going to have to turn. You can't violate the will of the voters the whole time. And if that is the case, if we can unlock the oil and gas industry again, if we can cut back on the spending, by the way, make the Trump tax cuts permanent, it'll take the pressure off the Federal Reserve's tightening, and you may have a much better outlook for the economy and the stock market in those circumstances.
Yep. The FBN team, again, you can make a lot of money with these people. You really can.
Or lose a lot less.
There you go. That's good, too. Charles, Maria, Larry, as always,
Good
thank
to see
you.
you all. So, just in, we have some new projections for you. In Colorado, Democratic Senator Michael Bennet will defeat Republican businessman Joe O'Dea. This is a race that a lot of people thought O'Dea might pull a surprise on. Chris Christie just said the other day he thought this would be perhaps the surprise of the night, and that one has not gone Mr. O'Dea's way.
It was uphill there for O'Dea. I mean, Colorado has been a bluish state. He had some good moments in debates. Businessman, outsider, construction, owner of a construction company. Bennet, a senator who used to be the superintendent of Denver schools, will pull this out walking away, really. One of the governor's races we're following in South Dakota, we can now project that Republican Governor Kristi Noem will win a second term, defeating Democrat Jamie Smith. And she's talked about other aspirations, at least hinted at them. Other people have talked about them for her.
There was some reporting that was out there that that was a tight race, so the numbers certainly do not back that up. She won enormously.
We are just minutes away from the next round of poll closings, and those are in Montana, Nevada, big Senate race there, Utah, Senate race we've been following there. Harris Faulkner is talking with voters on the issues driving them to the ballot box. Hey, Harris.
We absolutely are. We're back with the voters' voices from our live audience. Pollster Lee Carter and I have been getting the reactions to the top issues of these midterm elections. And Fox News voter analysis shows 80% of Americans are concerned about crime. Cities, towns, neighborhoods seeing a spike in violence, and people are worried. Show of hands for our fabulous audience tonight. How concerned are you about crime compared with, are you more concerned about crime now than you were 2 years ago?
Wow.
That's every single hand that's gone up. Let's get into this. Crime turned out to be the top issue, just like it is in this studio. The race for New York governor, it's making a difference there potentially. Democratic incumbent Kathy Hochul seeing her double-digit lead over Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin evaporate in the last few weeks. Now watch the lines on your screen as we gather the voters' reaction real time to Congressman Zeldin.
Our streets safe again. I'm running to take back our streets and to support unapologetically our men and women in law enforcement. This is about all of us together, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, as New Yorkers, to make sure our streets are safe again, to make sure our subways are safe again. This is our opportunity.
All right, talk to me about the reaction there, the grades they gave it.
Yeah, so you can see there that Democrat line, blue line, which you wouldn't expect to be very favorable, was a C for on this message. Republicans, that red line gave an A, the gray line, independents, a B. what people really want to be hearing is a candidate who is going to address and not dismiss crime.
You know what? I'm going to call an audible here and go over to Kamani, who is from New Jersey. I think you're at Rutgers, right? What have Democrats really missed the ball on here? Because this issue is huge, and you still see many of them just kind of whistling past the roses on this.
Yeah, so I definitely think, again, that this is a messaging issue that's just been missed. Crime is such a bipartisan issue. It affects everyone in their everyday lives. And I think that we need leaders to change the rhetoric in politics, because
this is your party.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, these are Democrats.
If we can get bipartisan support in changing the rhetoric, so many things will change. Our men and women in the FBI and other police agencies are working overtime because they have to keep up with politically motivated violence. And that's a type of crime that's been missing.
Well, look, on the ground, what people are experiencing every day is more of a situation of, like here in New York City, the mayor just saying that it's a perception of crime and not looking at what people are really feeling. I know, PJ, you're on this side, and you have your feelings about crime. You're an independent, by the way.
Independent. I'm a bar owner in the suburbs, but I also teach culinary in inner city school that I just left. Lost 3 students in less than that many years of my students. The school has lost more than that, and it's tragic. I don't know the answer to it, but I know what's going on right now is not the answer. So I think a lot of people made changes in how they voted because of it.
And you're in Ridley Park, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
You're talking about the school situation there and young kids, those families going to funerals now because of crime there.
I was teaching in North Philly. I just changed jobs to the town that I also have my business in. But yeah.
I'm so sorry for the loss there.
Thank you.
Yeah, Democrats did not hit that issue.
They didn't, and I think it really shows up in the messaging, and it really played well, I think, in New York, and I think in other states as well.
All right, well, we'll see what happens with that governor's race. They've made it interesting, at least Republicans have, with Lee Zeldin. Now back to Brett and Martha.
Harris, thank you. We are just minutes away from our next round of poll closings. And while we await the results from across the country, we've got some numbers coming in Ohio. J.D. Vance has taken the lead there over Tim Ryan. We're getting some new numbers coming in from Pennsylvania, where Lieutenant Governor Fetterman is in the lead, but it's still early, about 35% of that vote in, as you look live at the Oz campaign headquarters.
Georgia tightening as well between Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock, and Kemp looks to be above 50% now on that governor's race. So whether or not, we're going to be able to determine that he will not face a runoff is something we hope to have some answers on shortly.
What does look pretty certain is that Republicans are having a good night in the House. How good? We'll know in a matter of minutes, likely. Again, Fox News, Democracy 2022 rolls on after this. It is 10 o'clock in New York, and polls have just closed in 3 more states. In the Nevada Senate race, the Fox News decision desk believes Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto and Republican challenger Adam Laxalt are locked in a very tight race out there. It's too early to call.
We also believe that Republican Senator Mike Lee has a solid lead as he seeks a 3rd term against independent Evan McMullin, but it's too early to say whether or not he will defeat him in that race. And here's a look at the Senate balance of power right now. 40 Republicans to 42 Democrats, and you can see the seats that are yet to be filled in tonight as we wait.
But we're ticking down there. And in the Nevada governor's race, the decision desk says it's too early to call. A very close race between Democratic Governor Steve Sisolak and Republican Sheriff Joe Lombardo. That race has been interesting to watch, and it really tracks that Nevada Senate race as well.
Yeah, they've had a snow event in Nevada, and they have shut down a few things, but the counting goes on there. Let's go to Bill Hemmer and get a look at some, we maybe should update people on what's going on in Ohio.
I think we stay on the East Coast here for a moment and just show you, because there's a lot more data coming in. I think a few of these races have changed too, and they may have changed perhaps ultimately in significant ways. I'm going to start in the Southeast in Georgia, because this thing is razor tight, right? Herschel Walker has just taken a lead over Raphael Warnock. It's the first time I've seen on this panel, anyway, Walker leading Warnock in that race. Let me just go to the governor's race and see what the margin is for Brian Kemp. Kemp's almost at 54% over Stacey Abrams. It just gets wider and wider, just a little bit, but wider and wider throughout the night here. Let's come back to the Senate. I'll pop up here. Just to update folks, we haven't forgotten about North Carolina. It's just that our observation right now is Ted Budd continues to lead with about 72% of that vote in North Carolina. I'm going to pop around here a little bit. I know there's a lot of interest in what's happening in Ohio. So you're at 61% of the estimated vote, and J.D. Vance continues to lead there. But again, I would watch Cuyahoga County. I would keep an eye on Cleveland, Ohio. That's up here in the Northeast, and just see how. Let me check this. Okay, you only have 42% of the vote in. A lot of Democratic votes in Cuyahoga County. So I know the Ryan team they'd be certainly pulling for a bigger margin out of Cuyahoga County to put themselves in a better slot here. What we have not looked at, I want to take you to 3 more states here, and I'll do it quickly, all right? This is Wisconsin. You're at 41%. Ron Johnson has run 2 very close races. He's running for a 3rd one right now against 35-year-old Mandela Barnes. He's the attorney. He's the
Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. I appreciate that. I'm sorry. Thank you.
You got a lot of stuff going on in there.
I got to phone a friend is what I got to do over here. It's like, you live on a Samsung and they hand you an iPhone. They say, go, right? Okay, so right now, Johnson trailing in that race up there. Let me just see what's happening in the governor's race, folks. So Tim Michaels now trailing Tony Evers in that race as well. Very, very interesting. Watch that in Wisconsin. Let me pop out here. We haven't checked on Pennsylvania. Here we go. On the governor's race, Shapiro, the attorney general, with an easy lead over Mastriano. And that is still just about a 1/3 of the vote in. On the Senate race, here's the big one. All right, here we go. At this point in the race, Fetterman has a lead on Dr. Mehmet Oz. You're at 37% in, difference of about 91,000. Here's what I would watch in PA, and it's pretty simple to break down this state. It's Erie in the Northwest. It's Pittsburgh here, Allegheny County. It's Philadelphia over here in the Southeast, and all these collar counties that surround it. If you're a Democrat, that's where you win in Pennsylvania. If you're a Republican, you got to try and keep that vote down in places like Pittsburgh, in Philadelphia. We have yet to check in on New York. Here is, this is the Senate race now. Chuck Schumer's been called, not much of a race there, but here is the governor's race in New York. Kathy Hochul right now at 64%. Lee Zeldin, a tick under 36%. A lot of votes still outstanding here. Let's see what's happening, right? Long Island, we've talked about that. On the House races, there's a lot of keen interest here in New York about what's happening in these House races, because frankly, you don't find a lot of drama often in New York. But look what Nicole Malliotakis is doing in Staten Island. Just about 2 cycles ago, Max Rose and Malliotakis, this would have been a 50-50 race, with the outcome decided by 51-49 either way. Right now, she's an easy winner with close to 63% of the vote. Staten Island right down here in the southern tip of Manhattan. I want to check here. This is AOC, easy winner, 70% of the vote here in the boroughs of New York. Let's check in with New York 17. All right, this is Sean Patrick Maloney. It's the first time I've seen this guy, so we're taking it in real time here, up against Mike Lawler, the Republican. He has a lead right now. Why is this important? Sean Patrick Maloney runs the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. He is responsible for overseeing all the House Democrats and their election campaigns throughout the country. He right now trails Mike Lawler. Republicans were big on Lawler. They thought he was a good candidate. That district is right above New York in the Hudson River Valley, just across from West Point along the Hudson River. The thing that's tricky about this whole deal here is that in New York, Democrats drew the map. They gave it to a judge. Judge said, we're not going to do this. Go back and do it again. They did it again. A judge said, forget it. I'm going to outsource it to another judge who will decide how you can draw the lines in this race. What was the outcome of that? They forced a lot of leading Democrats in New York now to go against each other in this campaign. And Sean Patrick Maloney was one of them. His home is in Cold Spring, New York. It's right on the Hudson River. He was forced to go seek another district. He chose the 17th district. The problem for him is that 3/4 of the people who live in the 17th district have never had to vote on Sean Patrick Maloney as a candidate before. So that was the challenge he had. selling himself to 75% new voters in that district. You got that? I mean, we've been talking about this for a year, but that's the reality for someone like Maloney, and right now he is trailing. Just keep an eye on that, because that will be one of those races where Republicans will look back. I want to pop down to Virginia real quick while I got you guys here. Where Republicans will look back and say, yeah, we took down the king. We took down Maloney. That is a major target for them tonight throughout these races. Virginia. Remember when we started here, guys, 4 hours ago? What Republicans said is that if they win in 2, they'll have the majority in the House. If they win in 7, there will be a wave. If they win in 10, you're going to ask yourself, how many feet high is that wave? So let's go in and see where we are right now, a little bit past 10 o'clock in the evening. Virginia 2, Jen Kiggins still leads Elaine Luria. Remember, she's seeking a 3rd term right now in this area of Norfolk down here in the southeastern corner of the state. Let me pop out here to Abigail Spanberger, another Democrat seeking re-election. Right now, she has a slight lead on Yesli Vega. The difference is 4,700 raw votes. Wow, that's tight. This is the area just south of Washington, D.C. Spanberger used to have a district just on the west side of Richmond. She had a tough race in 2018, and she won. She had a tough race in 2020, and she won. She has been outspoken at times against her own party, and right now, it looks like Spanberger hangs on to a lead right there with Yesli Vega. I'll show you one more here. This is Virginia 10 in the northern part of the state. Republicans were big on Hung Cao. They liked him as a candidate. They liked his resume. They liked his background. They liked him on the trail. Hung Cao, born in Saigon, Vietnam, now trailing Jennifer Wexton by about, 14,000 votes, raw votes now in Northern Virginia. So Youngkin, a year ago, Glenn Youngkin won this state, flipped everybody on its head right now through the state of Virginia. All of these races that you see here on the House side that are considered to be key races now, Youngkin did much better than what you saw Trump versus Biden 12 months prior. All right, so we got a span of 24 months here, and we can take a sample from 2020 to 2021 and now to 2022. Now, what I said was majority, wave, how high is the wave? So we haven't gotten to this point yet. I'm not quite sure about this either, but there's a few more races to check in. I can tell you this, up here and Rhode Island, I know a lot of folks at home weren't following this race, but we were. This is Rhode Island 2. This is Alan Fung. He's the former mayor of Cranston, Rhode Island. Republicans love this guy. You see his campaigns. He's always happy, and he's always going for it. They were big on him and beating Seth Magaziner. He's trailing right now by about 3 points in that race. If Fung goes down, that would be a big disappointment to Republicans who are trying to, run up the margins in the House.
Rhode Island.
Oh, it is Rhode Island. Brett, we never talk about it, do we? Same thing for Connecticut, okay? So this is the west part of Connecticut. This is Connecticut number 5. This is George Logan, okay? African-American taking on Johanna Hayes. She's had the seat for a number of years now. Also African-American woman. It's early here, but they were big on Logan. Let's see whether or not he can catch her or not. These races are the kind of races that the Republican leadership said, if we win in places like Rhode Island and we win in places like Connecticut, you will be looking at a red wave. Right now, though, at least on the East Coast, we have not seen that. Still time to go, but we'll watch how this rolls in.
Nice job. Let's make a call. The Fox News Decision Desk can call the Republican State Attorney General in Missouri. Eric Schmidt will be the next senator from Missouri, defeats Democratic candidate Trudy Bush Valentine. This is the seat to replace retiring Senator Roy Blunt. A couple of other things. Ohio, if we could put up that race board really quick. The senior Vance strategist telling our own Mark Meredith that this race, in their mind, was not going to be close. They are very happy with their lead growing. Quote, we're still hitting our numbers. So they are talking very aggressively about Ohio. And let me just take you to Pennsylvania really quickly. This is from the Fetterman campaign. An aide there is pointing to their candidate's performance in smaller counties with more than 95% in, where they say that Mehmet Oz is underperforming Trump from 2020. These are Forest, Elk, and Wyoming. That spread right there. Again, that's early, 41% in. But we're going to talk to a guy who may know something about Virginia.
Yeah, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin joins us now. He rode a red wave into office last year. He's been campaigning to elect more Republicans. Governor, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's great to have you with us this evening. I'd love to get your take on the trip that we just took around these 3 districts in Virginia. And the first one looks like it is going red. The second one, Virginia 7, as Bill just described it, is kind of tight at this point. And the third one looks like it is trending a little bit more blue. Can you give us a sense of what you're seeing there? Because the vote is not all in yet.
Yeah, so of course, we always felt that the road to the majority was going to go through the 2nd congressional district. And Jen Kiggans has run a great campaign. And we're seeing that the Virginia Beach area particularly is coming in strong yet again. Remember, this is the home to the world's largest naval base in Naval Station Norfolk. And this is a strong military community that really does believe in Jen Kiggans, and she's going to be a great congresswoman. The 7th was always in the margin, and boy, we had a ton of momentum, and Yesli ran a great campaign. It's awfully hard to unseat an incumbent. She's run a great campaign. Let's watch all these votes get counted tonight. I also think it speaks to the strength of the Hispanic community across Virginia. We won the Hispanic vote last year. You saw what happened in Florida and Miami-Dade County tonight. And I think the biggest message of this entire election season is the glacial shift in the demographics, particularly with regards to the Hispanic community. And then we were all pulling for Hung. He is a great candidate. He is a hero. He's the American dream epitomized. And again, he was trying to unseat an incumbent. And there was a lot of momentum there in Loudoun County. You know, parents matter in Virginia, and particularly in Loudoun County, ground zero. And education continues to be such a strong motivator for voters. And we've come a long way in Northern Virginia, but I'm just disappointed for Hung. He was going to be a great congressman, and that was one that I was hoping we might see an upset.
We haven't called it yet, Governor, but it looks like it's trending that way. Oh, he did concede. We're getting word now that he did concede that race. So you've got 2 others that you're watching closely in Virginia. You know, Governor, you've bounced around the country. You've campaigned for a lot of candidates. You even gave Republican gubernatorial candidate Tudor Dixon a vest up in Michigan, a vest like you wore on the campaign trail. She is trailing, but it looks like it's very close in Michigan as of this hour. As you bounced around the country, what was the sense that you got, and how does it translate issue-wise in your mind?
Well, around the nation, the exact same issues that we saw last year in Virginia are in the forefront of voters' minds. And we've been talking about it for the last year, ever since we won, that inflation and the runaway cost of living, coupled with crime, a real dissatisfaction with schools and parents being shoved out of their children's lives. And of course, the crisis at the border that's turned every state into a border state. These are the issues across America. And as I had a chance to campaign with a number of gubernatorial candidates and incumbents, these were the top issues. And I also believe that voters see the record of Republican governors. Performance matters. I think they're going to rehire all of them. I mean, it's really exciting to see Governor DeSantis so strong in Florida, and Governor Stitt and Governor Kemp and Kristi Noem. I mean, these are just strong governors who are getting rehired by their constituents for doing a great job. And I think that's what we're going to see in a lot of these races where Republican candidates, gubernatorial candidates, are going to unseat some Democrat governors that have not done a good job. And some of these races weren't expected to be tight, and they're going to be pretty darn tight in Michigan and Wisconsin and Nevada and Oregon and New Mexico and Kansas. And so let's watch those happen tonight. But I think it really does reflect a real sense of a need for voters to see their governors perform and deliver on these most basic concerns of rising crime, inflation, schools, and feeling secure about sending their kids out every day, that they're not going to run into a fentanyl pill disguised as something else, and all of a sudden they've got a tragedy.
Governor,
this is what's on people's minds, and this is what's going to change a lot of governor seats tonight, I
What
think.
do you think of the disconnect we're seeing, at least in some races, between governors who are winning big, DeWine, DeSantis, but he also won with a senator who won. But there is a disparity in some of these races between the governors and the Senate races. What do you think about that?
Well, a lot of these are incumbent governors who people have seen perform. And as I said, performance matters. And voters expect their elected officials to deliver on campaign promises, not just before the election, but to turn it into action afterwards. And I think it's a real reflection of the trust that Republican governors have gained with their constituents across the country. And I think the Republican governor's strength will bring along a number of these Senate Republicans who aren't as well known, but can really see some coattails from Governor Kemp in Georgia and Governor DeWine in Ohio.
So, Governor, if Republicans do take the House, and let's just say for the sake of argument, they get a majority in the Senate, what would you like to see them do? What should they do to show leadership for their party in these 2 years when it will be very difficult to put anything on the president's desk that he'll sign?
Well, I think that they first need to get moving on with promises made and start with the border, start with reining in runaway spending and recognizing that there's real statements that can be made in reestablishing some fiscal responsibility. And I think this is what voters expect. They're sending folks to Congress, both in the House and the Senate, and I do think that the Republicans will end up in a majority in both to deliver on promises made. And this is a moment where voters are tired of not only getting something different than they expected out of the Biden administration, where all of a sudden left liberal policies have left America really weakened, our economy in shambles, and real distrust, to a moment where they're sending folks to Washington to deliver. And so I think that's what we'll get from a Republican-led House and Senate, a recognition that they were sent there to get a job done, and I think they'll go do it.
Governor, you bounced around the country. A lot of people ask the question, after you do that, do you have aspirations for a different office after you're term limited in Virginia?
Well, I've been very, very focused on November the 8th and supporting great candidates and really helping folks that are standing for these values that are most important, of making sure that the economy is delivering for our citizens and not a headwind against them keeping their hard-earned money, and making sure that parents are represented not just at the table, but at the head of the table, and that law enforcement is supported and not demeaned. These are basic kitchen table concerns. And this is where we've been focused.
Yeah.
I believe that
like,
we're working hard in Virginia and delivering.
Sounds like you've been thinking about it, though.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm always humbled on this discussion. I've been very focused on being the best governor in Virginia that I can be. And by the way, I think we've had a great first year. And I think that one of the key things that voters expect out of an elected governor is he goes to work and delivers on his promises. And that's what we've done in Virginia.
Governor Glenn Youngkin, we appreciate your time tonight.
We'll be watching. Thank you, Governor.
Let's bring back our panel, and we welcome Mark Penn and Mo Elleithee and Mark Thiessen. Mark, your thoughts first on what you're seeing tonight and maybe what Governor Youngkin just said.
So I'm going to make a very bold prediction, which is the big winner tonight is Karl Rove, because Karl is not going to have to count any hanging chads in Florida. So we've replaced the Brooks Brothers riot with the Guayabera Revolution in Miami-Dade. I'll tell you, if you look at what happened in Florida, Governor Youngkin just said it, performance matters. So DeSantis is a populist. He's a counterpuncher just like Donald Trump. He went after Disney. He punches back really hard. But he has a record as a conservative reformer that is outstanding. And on top of that, his management of the hurricane, if you contrast that with the COVID management from the White House, was spot on. So I think you've got a package there. You know, I think Laura said the future of the Republican Party is in Florida. I think she's right.
Mark, what do you think the message of tonight is so far?
Well, I think so far it's a shift to the Republicans, but not a wave. I think the House gets a clear rebuke for overspending, inflation, and the economy. But I also think that on the Senate, particularly the Trump candidates are struggling. And to me, this looked like Florida was a real wave for the Republicans, an affirmation of DeSantis as a potential Republican presidential candidate. And I think this puts Donald Trump in a very difficult position.
So, Mark, we talked about the closing messages, and in previous interviews, you questioned the Democrats' closing with threats to democracy, talking about abortion off of the Roe v. Wade decision overturn. But now, when you look at these numbers now, do you think that worked?
No, I don't think it worked. It's not like I think the Democrats are going to come out of this with seats. Look, I always think messages that bring the country together, that win swing voters, are better messages for the long term. It's how you ultimately win presidential races. I think Democrats rallied their base. They avoided some really difficult issues, but I think it was a divisive message, and I think the country comes out of this election just as divided as it was before. And this is not going to be resolved. You know, the voters said they don't want Joe Biden or Donald Trump running for president. The country wants to move forward, and until they get to move forward, they're going to be very evenly divided, and that's what I think we're seeing.
Mo?
Yeah, Mo, how's that message heard at the White House?
I mean, look, and I'm going to agree with Mark here. We've gone are the days where we would see these major pendulum swings. We're seeing a pendulum nudge.
Well,
Right?
it could be a pretty big swing in the House.
Well, it might be.
Well, how
but
about
when you
even the spread of the majority?
But here's the thing: when you're looking, I mean, and Bill, I think, did a very good job of going through it in his last segment. The races that they need to win in the House to get that major swing, they're not getting. If they can't knock off an Abigail Spanberger, if they can't win that seat in Rhode Island, now there's a lot of territory to go, and so believe me, I've been out of the predictions business since 2016. But those are the races they need to win to see a major swing. And what we're seeing in race after race, and we're especially seeing this in these Senate races, are razor-thin margins. So even if the Republicans start winning a lot of these Senate seats by these razor-thin margins, Mark's absolutely right. It's just showing how absolutely divided we are as a people. There's no huge mandate right now.
What about the fact that you're moving the needle in places that Biden won by 10 and 12 and 15 points? So when you look at some of the House races that the GOP picked up in the last round, they moved that needle, right? So it's not always done, you know, in a large way. Sometimes it's incremental in some of these states.
I think what we're seeing is the needle is just keep moving back and forth, just right of center or left of center, because a lot of those districts were ones that people were saying, you know, in 2018, Democrats are moving the needle on, winning seats that were traditionally Republican
Karl
seats.
Rove, weigh in. What do you have?
Well, look, with all due respect to Mo, the Democrats didn't move the needle last time around. The Republicans did in 2020, and they're moving it again in 2022. And from having gone from a Democrat substantial majority in the House before the 2020 elections to where the Democrats are going to lose tonight control of the House, and it will be a considerable number. It will be 20 or 25 seats. And somehow reading good things for Democrats out of that, there ain't much good news in there for them.
Dana, the other thing is in the Senate side, the next cycle really sets up for Republicans as far as the map goes and what's being defended and what's being gone after. So this cycle actually was not a great cycle if you looked at the map.
Right. So I'll just give you one example, and that is of West Virginia. Okay, so that you have Joe Manchin there, who has been kind of a thorn in the White House's side, however, came through in the end in the Inflation Reduction Act, which a lot of people who are voting on the economy today are saying, wait, actually, we didn't like that. And when it comes to energy issues, we've talked about that a lot tonight, and Maria Bartiromo's talking about it. Joe Manchin is in the energy state. He's in West Virginia. He had to rebuke the president for saying that he was going to end all coal jobs the other day. And the president's press secretary came out and said, oh, sorry, his words were twisted. No, actually, he said what he meant. That's going to be just one of those races out there. And another one, Brett, is in Montana. John Tester is the incumbent. He did win, but it was a close race. And if he decides to run again, that will be another squeaker. But there's many races where Republicans could do well in 2024.
What's the, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask
Thank you, brother.
Mark and Mo a question. So what do you think the president's takeaway is here? It's likely, the overwhelming likelihood he's going to lose the House. He could lose the Senate, maybe not. Suppose they keep the Senate. What does he take away from this? Does he adjust his agenda? Does he full speed ahead? What does he do? What do you think, Mark?
Well, look, I've wanted the president to adjust his agenda for a long time, right? I think there's going to be some meetings at the White House. If they change the staff, then I think the president's going to change the agenda. I think if he doesn't change the staff, I think they're going to stick to it. I think Joe Biden wants to run for president. He wants to stick with his agenda. He does not want to change. He is not a Bill Clinton, whom I worked with, who did radically change after these kinds of results. If you see him change the White House, however, then I think all bets are off.
No.
Look, I mean, I think the president's already started signaling what he's going to want to talk about.
And
we'll see what he does come out. I mean, they say he's going to make a statement tomorrow, right? I think I heard that. So I think we'll start to see some tea leaves there. I think part of it depends on what a new Republican majority in the House does as well, though. And
I get that, but what do you think the president's going to do?
We'll hear tomorrow.
I
just got the wrap. I just got the wrap. So.
All right, checking in on some more big governor's races. You just saw them on the wall there. American out west in Texas, the Latino Republicans hoping to make inroads in the border districts. We talked about that. We'll bring you there as Fox News Democracy 2022 rolls on.
All right, let's take a look at some of the Senate races. These are really the big marquee issues of the night. As we take a look at Georgia, where Herschel Walker has been pulling ahead over the last hour or so, I would say. I think he's going to let us know if he's coming out to speak, and we can dip into that.
He just took off. It was just a drive-by.
Yeah.
It's not done.
It was not nothing has been decided there. Vance is also pulled ahead. You can see in the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Maybe we can tighten up on some of these a little bit and get people a closer look. North Carolina is looking good for Ted Budd at this point in the evening, but we're still waiting for a lot of numbers to come in, and all of these are very, very tight.
By the way, on the bottom of the screen, you'll see that ticker go through. You can also follow on foxnews.com, which, you put the computer right over here, you do a little stuff, and there you go. Alexandria Hoff is at the Laxalt campaign headquarters in Las Vegas, I should say. Alexandria.
Well, Brett, we're just about to head over there. We wanted to finish it out here at this polling location in Clark County. And, I want to say first, it rains about 25 days here in Las Vegas, and this happened to be one of them. But still, we've seen a pretty impressive showing at this location. Although the polls have closed now, we've counted about 200 people still inside waiting to cast their ballot, which they still can do if they were in line at the time. This weather, though, it did have a pretty significant impact. In terms of concern, at least, we don't know exactly how it's impacted turnout just yet. But while it's been rain and high winds here up to the north near Reno, heavy snow has been falling throughout the day. Now, to get into a little dynamic of this race here, it's really, really interesting. We're here in Clark County, home of Las Vegas, and this is an area where Democrats spend a whole lot of time and effort, including incumbent Senator Catherine Cortez Masto. This area, Clark County, and then you have Washoe County. Those are the two with the largest number of Democratic voters. But then you go to the 15 rural counties, and that is where Republican challenger Adam Laxalt, he has really put his focus, hoping that high turnout in those areas would help offset losses in Washoe and in Clark County. But we've seen something really fascinating coming out of Washoe County. Those vote totals, or at least the turnout totals that we've seen throughout the day, Republicans had outnumbered Democrats 2.5 times in Washoe County. So the dependence on those rural counties for Laxalt really may not be as large as he had once expected. But we have another issue here when you look at turnout. We have early voting, but also these mail-in ballots. In this state, you could postmark your mail-in ballot by today. It will still count, or you could have the option to drop it off in person. And in some of those cases, those mail-in ballots will not be counted tonight. It could take up to 7 days. Guys?
Okay, Alexandria, thank you so much. We do have a race call to make, and that is in Pennsylvania. For governor, we can now project that Josh Shapiro, the Democrat, will beat Doug Mastriano. Shapiro, the Attorney General, has run a pretty strong race. He's running well ahead of the Senate candidate there, Lieutenant Governor Fetterman. We can make this call. There was a concern about Mastriano in Republican circles, but Democrats, remember, spent a lot of money putting Mastriano, supporting him in the primary, one of several candidates around the country that they did that to. Shapiro, though, to his credit, ran a pretty tight race, one in which a lot of luminaries came in to support him, and he will win with a pretty big spread in Pennsylvania.
It's another race where we talk a lot about whether or not there's a split decision that voters have between Shapiro and Dr. Mehmet Oz in that race. We've got a ways to go before we can get to any decision there. But Mastriano obviously could not stand up to the challenge of Josh Shapiro, who was very middle of the road and was very well liked in the state of Pennsylvania. He's 56 to 42 in that race. So let's bring in Republican Tim Scott, who has had a very good night and will serve another term in the United States Senate. He has been a very popular senator and also one who gets a lot of attention on the national stage as well. Senator, congratulations to you on your win this evening. Your thoughts on your win and on what else is going on out there.
We are really excited where we are today.
Hey, Senator, we've got to get the crowd to calm down just a bit. We can't hear you. There we go.
There we go.
Nor could I hear you. But,
okay.
I'm going to assume that you asked how's it going up here. We're doing well. We are looking at the numbers around the country. Certainly, we thank God and the voters of South Carolina for an opportunity to continue to represent them for the next 6 years. Looking around the country, I'm really excited. I'm still leaning into the Republican wave. I think we're going to win more races than we lose, which means that we will be back in the majority. I would say to every single voter on the West Coast, keep pushing. We can win. And I'm excited about where we are right now.
You know, your friend Trey Gowdy, I think, has a question for you. Trey?
Senator, why was it so close?
Trey, that's a great question. I didn't do all that I should have done. 62 to 37 is way too close from my perspective. I agree with you, Trey. Thank you for reminding me.
Trey, do you have anything else you want to ask him?
I am not going to ask you what they're asking me, what your future plans are. My guess is just to go to bed and get some sleep. Are those your future plans?
Well, actually, Trey, I think you made a strong announcement earlier, and I want to make it clear that you were 100% right. One of the things I have in my future is buying the Dallas Cowboys. You're 100% right.
There you go. Hey, Senator, as you bounced around the country, and you were a very popular surrogate for a lot of candidates, we asked this to Virginia Governor Youngkin. What did you see coming back as far as the issues, and what do you take from that to, if Republicans control the Senate, what you all are going to do with a Democratic president?
Yeah, but the one thing we have to do is create the contrast between the Biden administration and common sense. So if you think about the fact that we have enough energy resources in this country to be energy independent, we should focus on that as a priority. You think about 19 months of inflation outpacing pay increases. That means that Biden has delivered a pay cut to the American people. 8 months, over 8%. Devastating impact for people who grew up like I did in a single-parent household, working paycheck to paycheck. We can turn the spigot off, slow down the spending in Washington. That means your paycheck will go up because inflation will go down. We have to secure our borders. If we are serious about American security, we have to stop the flow of fentanyl across our southern border. We also have to make sure that we do not find 98 more people on the terrorist watch list crossing our southern border. So finding a way to create an impediment on our southern border is one of the fastest ways for us to prove to the American people we're listening.
So, you know, as we look across the state right now, across the country right now, there's still this question about whether or not there is a red wave this evening, and it seems to be a bit tempered, at least at this moment. And if that is the case, why do you think that is?
Well, there's no doubt that all the polls came out last last 2 weeks, suggesting that we were heading in the right direction. I said across the country, keep the pedal to the metal. I think it's premature for us to figure out whether it's a red wave or not. I would suggest that we should continue to focus on those battleground states. The good news is the states that were in question, Georgia, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Ohio, we're still in really good positions there. Pennsylvania, I'm still very optimistic. And then the pickup states, you think about where we are going to be in Nevada and Arizona State. In Arizona, I think we still have a strong chance to finish strong.
Senator Scott, we appreciate your time, and you can cue the people behind you.
Okay. Let's hear it from the people behind me.
All right, have a good night, sir.
Moms
Thank
for
you.
Tim Scott there. Thank you.
Let's
Thanks,
head
Edgar.
over to Bill Hemmer with the latest. Where are you taking us, Bill?
A couple things here. Just want to show you a bit of comparison in Pennsylvania. This may be a pattern. It may be real. It may change. I'm not quite sure. Carl, you check my numbers as I go through, and then I'll take you down to George as well. So these are the 2020 results in eastern Pennsylvania and Northampton County. Now, when we went into the election 2 years ago, this is one of those bellwether counties that always predicts the winner, okay? So this is, what I just want to show you here is just, these are just percentages only. It's not raw votes, okay? So Biden's a tick under 50% in Northampton County. And this year, Fetterman is running ahead of that, okay? Now, there's only about 60% of the vote in, estimated vote in. So let me just change this one more time here. You see where Biden's margin is? Now you see Fetterman. Now, draw your attention up to here, to this corner, okay? That's 7,200 raw votes leading in Northampton County for Fetterman over Oz with about 60% of the vote in, okay? Now, I'm going to change it and show you what happened 2 years ago. See what the difference is, 1,200? So Oz is doing, Fetterman is doing better in this part of Pennsylvania as it stands right now. Now, hang with me down here, okay? Let me clear this. This is the city of Philadelphia. Now, I'm going to show you some numbers that are going to blow your mind, okay? If you're a Democrat running in Pennsylvania, you have to crush the numbers in Philadelphia. Look what Joe Biden did 2 years ago. Look at that.
Who's that?
471,000 raw votes. The state was just decided by 88,000 or so. So Biden was up around 81%. At the moment, in this current Senate race, this is Fetterman. So slightly below. But look at this number. It's 160,000. If you were to take it, I would ask my math genius across the floor, take 160,000 and multiply it by 2. You're at 320,000, okay? So even if you're at that number, Carl, you would be underperforming what Joe Biden did 2 years ago, okay? So I showed you the problem for Fetterman in Philadelphia, but the advantage for Fetterman and perhaps some of the other counties that's happening in another part of the state.
Which is what his campaign said, was the smaller counties, 95% in, et cetera.
So, and we could, and I whip you around this thing here and show you a few other things in the state. But just so our audience knows, at the moment, a little bit over half of the vote in, Fetterman leads by 4 points, and the difference is 113,000. You could go out here and shop around for votes. But again, it's Pittsburgh, it's Erie, it's Philadelphia down here in the southeast. And I want to pop out
Carl,
here.
do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl, and I'm going to show you one more thing here.
Look, you were fed some stuff from them saying they did better in 3 counties. Well, there are 3 counties, Franklin, Adams, and Lancaster, where Fetterman's doing worse than Biden. So it's a complex picture.
I read the Vance people and the Fetterman people. We're just trying to be fair and balanced.
Right, exactly.
Can I show you?
So,
Sorry.
But look, this right now, Fetterman does have an advantage. But we got a long way to go in this evening, and what I want to see is more in the southeast. The question is, can Oz run better in Bucks and Chester and Montgomery and Delaware, the suburban counties around Philadelphia, than Donald Trump did? If he can erase that 1.2% advantage that Biden had and win. If he doesn't, it's a problem.
I mean, that's the area where he talked a lot about crime in Philadelphia and what's happening in the suburbs. And he spoke a lot to families who had lost people in that crime surge in Philadelphia. So we'll see if it paid off for him.
You guys want to see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so keep your eye on this one, right? You want to do that one, or you want to do Oz?
Well, let me say one more thing before you jump into this. Remember, we still are seeing these numbers will have a bigger impact of the early vote, which is more Fetterman. The later we go in the evening, you'll notice.
So say that again, because we said it earlier, but each state does it differently, how they count it and what goes first.
And Pennsylvania counts the mail-in ballots that they got and began working at 7 a.m. this morning, which tend to be more Democrat. Those get reported early, and then they begin moving the ballots that were cast today, which tend to be more Republican.
Wow. Okay, so Carl, here we go. This is Chester County. You just mentioned it. These are the collar counties around Philadelphia. Oz at 44%, right? What was Trump doing? Trump was doing 40%, right? Okay, so you're 1 for 1, Carl. Let's move around here to Montgomery County. Wow, with 30% in. Oz at 20%. Here was Trump 2 years ago. All right, so he's got some work to do. But again, a lot of that vote is still outstanding.
20%. Go back when it gets to get to 30 and go back when it gets to 40, and the gap between the two is going to narrow. The question is, how rapidly can Oz move up as the election day votes show up, and is it enough to close the gap?
Marchand, you want to weigh in?
No, I think it's true. It's all about the Philadelphia suburbs. Oz knew that. That's where he centered his campaign. And he's obviously not running away with it. We're going to be here long into the night as to how this race is decided.
I would also point out that in Pennsylvania, they don't even begin the process of verifying the mail-in ballot. So they've got to grab the envelope, make sure it has a date on it, which was a big issue in the primary in Pennsylvania as well, and verify them before they even begin the process of running them all through the machine.
Yeah.
And the Fetterman campaign is obviously...
They do look at them to make certain that the exterior of the envelope meets the conditions of having been signed and dated.
Right.
Because each election authority has responsibility to alert the voter, you got a mistake with your ballot, you got to come and cure it.
Then they've got some time to go do that.
Yeah, well, but they do that as it arrives, but they can't open the ballot and do all the stuff you need to do until 7 a.m. on Tuesday morning.
Brett, the Fetterman campaign filed these lawsuits to try to make sure that unsigned, undated ballots were going to be accepted. There were actually, I think, 3 legal filings by the Fetterman campaign. They don't do that unless they think it's...
You can argue that both ways. You could argue they don't do that unless they're worried, right?
Yeah.
And think they may need whatever extra votes
Well,
they think they can get out of that. So I think, but I mean, I think everybody knew this was going to be close, and they've hired Mark Elias, who is many things, but he's the Democrats' legal eagle for these kinds of challenges. He's also the guy that was heavily behind the Trump-Russia collusion conspiracy, or charge of conspiracy. And so this is going to be bare knuckles all the way, it looks like, and we may not know the outcome of this for some time. If it gets so close that lawsuit could make a difference.
Here we go again.
Here we go again. Yeah.
Hey, Bill, let's go to Ohio real quick, because that's one that's separating.
Sure do. I just want to give Carl his due.
Okay.
All right. You said it. I just want to prove it to our audience. All right. This is the job that Oz needs to do. Okay, this is Bucks County, so you're just outside the city of Philadelphia. Suburban, right? That's your suburban vote. Here's where Donald Trump was 2 years ago. So you see the challenge for Oz, okay? Now, Brett, go ahead, call it out. You wanted to
Ohio,
go to
yeah,
Ohio,
which seems like it's separating a little bit.
Let me just dial this bad boy up here a second. Okay. Here we are back in the Buckeye State, 81% reporting now, okay? And you see the advantages, not quite 8 points, but it's close to it. Wow. I've been telling you for a while that, I mean, if I'm the Ryan team, I want this county to show up for me. This is Cleveland, it's Cuyahoga, it's 3-1 Democrats, and you got 73% reporting. I don't know at this stage whether or not that number is going to be good enough to get the job done for J.D. Vance. Go ahead, Britt.
Is any of that Cuyahoga in, to your knowledge?
A lot of it is here. If you go here,
the lead persists even with a lot of Cuyahoga.
Is it purple rain or purple haze?
You know what? I love the way you talk. Stand by. Here we go. All right. It's like purple haze, right?
It's like purple fade.
It's purple rain down here, okay? So this is Cuyahoga County. And it did shade in a little bit here, but again, I'm just telling you. I mean, just based on experience and based on watching this state, Tim Ryan needs this number to get higher in Cuyahoga County in order for him to take this lead. Because right now, J.D. Vance is pulling ahead, and we'll see which way it goes.
All right, before we go to another state, we want to take you down outside of the studio here to Aisha Hasni, who's covering the Walker campaign in Georgia. Aisha, what's the feeling there on the ground?
Hey, Brett, good evening. You know, it's kind of like watching a football game. Not only do we have Georgia colors behind me, the crowd is just so fired up. Every couple of minutes when those results come on the TV behind me, they erupt into cheers. They're going to erupt in just a second when they see us on air. But just a couple of minutes ago, they got a big speech from Herschel Walker. He came out and tried to rev up the crowd, and he sure did that. He said that he came down from his war room to tell them, look, we're in this fight for the rest of the night, that he's not going anywhere, that he's here to win. He really has put up a strong fight. He's had to really make a case for himself, and he's been able to do that in the last couple of weeks here as polling showed that he was able to shore up his base and really narrow in that margin. We've been watching the results come in, and that margin continues to grow wider in between these two candidates. There have been about a point apart, but if that continues to widen, then we may actually have a winner tonight. Brett?
We really need to work on that satellite delay. You just popped up, so I think we'll get the delayed reaction behind you. Aisha, thank you very much.
And the Libertarian candidate there is, eclipsing the vote difference between these two candidates right now. So he's the difference, Chase Oliver, between being over the 50% threshold.
But again, 49.5 to 48.6. It's close. We're going to bounce around the country, and we're going to dig a little deeper. This is the wonky part of the show, and we will get you there for all you politics watchers. Stay with us. America's future taking shape before our very eyes. The votes are being counted. More race calls are on the horizon.
Just minutes from now, polls closing in 4 more states. We will bring that to you live as Fox News Democracy 2022 rolls on, folks. We'll be right back. Only family.
Okay, we're coming back with a race call in Virginia, one of the 3 races for the House that we've been following very closely. Fox News and AP can project that Abigail Spanberger will win this race against Yesli Vega. And this was a close race, but Spanberger ran away from the administration, away from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She tried to portray more moderate efforts, but she did vote with Nancy Pelosi most of the time, and that was a big thing for Vega in that race. We do have a Virginia 2 call as well, and that is Jennifer Kiggans will beat Elaine Luria. Elaine Luria on the January 6th committee. Kiggans, one of the stars. As we talked about, Virginia 2 was the race that Republicans really believed that they could get the majority if they got this race. They are going to get it tonight. They are not getting Virginia 7. We are still watching this. I'm sorry, we're not going to call that yet. This is the other one, Virginia 10. This is the Jennifer Wexton race, and this is more of a reach, Bill Hemmer, because these are the 3 that really we're watching closely.
As we started the night, we put all the key races to the left side of the map here. And these were the 3 we're watching here in Virginia. When they turn blue, it's Democrat. When they turn red, it's Republican. And Virginia 7. Spanberger has done something that is, she's a good candidate. You give it to her. After 2018, tough race down around Richmond, another tough race in 2020, and she's able to beat. Yesli Vega was a good candidate, law enforcement background. She was good on the stump, very enthusiastic, worked super hard, but Spanberger is able to hold her off. Let me just click down here. We have not called Virginia 2 yet. I know some others have out there, but maybe, this 10-point lead stands up here.
No, we just did. No, we did not call it. It's not called. What we did call is Virginia 10, he conceded. That is what we're learning.
Hung cow.
So now we have 2 Democrat wins in Virginia, and we're waiting on Virginia 2, the Elaine Luria.
And it looks like Kiggans is in a real good spot right now to win this. I mean, this is where we are, right? Just about 80% of the vote in. She's up 10 points. So in all likelihood, when we started the night, we had these 3 big races there in Virginia. It looks like at the moment the Democrats have a good chance of hanging on to 2 of the 3. Which I know will not make Kevin McCarthy happy, but we'll see what happens in other places across the country.
We had thought, of course, that Virginia might be a state where Republican pickups would signal a wave.
Right.
And they may win the Luria race, right? Kiggans may win. She's ahead.
Yes.
But the other 2 look like they've gone the other way. So that tells us something about across the country or doesn't tell us something
exactly
across the country.
How we read it. Let's go down to Washington. We've got Guy Benson and Marie Harf. Add them to the conversation. Guy, let me start with you. I mean, just reacting to this Virginia news. You were following this very closely, all three of those races, what this means. And it does look like the GOP is heading towards a House majority, but we just don't know how big.
Yeah, Virginia 2 is a majority maker type district for Republicans. 7 and 10 would have been wave makers and tsunami makers, respectively, but it looks like the Democrats have held on to both of those districts. So far, the evening, Brett, big picture for me is a tale of Florida and everything else. Epic, epic night so far for the Republicans in Florida. Shocking margins, 20 points almost for Ron DeSantis, unfathomable. And a lot of the heavy lifting so far in terms of House gains coming in Florida for the Republicans. Everywhere else, it's looking like a dogfight. If there is a national wave building for the Republicans, it hasn't quite materialized yet. It might do so later into the evening, but, a big blowout red wave early on, not happening.
Marie, welcome. Good to have you with us. Your
Thanks,
thoughts
Martha.
as you watch this develop, as we've talked about a lot, does Virginia give a message for the rest of the country or not?
I think it does. And every Democrat I am hearing from tonight is actually pretty happy with the results. In every place we were concerned that would really, indicate a red wave, we're just not seeing it. Even places like New Hampshire, where it looks like Maggie Hassan will hold on, those are good signs, particularly in the Senate. And again, as Guy said, we may get more of a wave the further we get into the evening, but it's just not there yet. And we may very well be looking at a situation where Kevin McCarthy is, in fact, the speaker with an incredibly small majority. Democrats keep the Senate. They pick up some seats in governors' mansions. And overall, you look back on this midterm and think Joe Biden and his party actually did pretty well. Democrats happy at almost 11 o'clock on this election night.
But, Guy, there's a lot yet to come. And we are seeing on the board there a check mark that Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire is going to win that Senate race over Don Bolduc. And that is a race we've been following very closely. There was a chance that Bolduc was going to pull that off. It was tight, a lot tighter than people thought it was. Your reaction to that, Guy?
Yeah, that was just like Virginia 10 on the House side. New Hampshire Senate was a tsunami watch type race. If Don Bolduc came from behind and beat Maggie Hassan, watch out. It could be a massive night for the Republicans across the country. That one's not going to pan out. Maggie Hassan, who I think on paper was very vulnerable, breathed a sigh of relief tonight. She didn't have a terribly strong opponent, so they're going to hold that seat, the Democrats are. Dogfight in Pennsylvania, and then you look out west. I think that's where a lot of the action is going to end up, in Nevada, in Arizona, of course. And then I hate to already float this possibility, but might the groundhog come out and show us 4 more weeks of a campaign in that Georgia Senate race? It could go for Walker tonight, or it might go to a runoff for December 6th, potentially again with Senate control on the line. That's something I'm watching.
Guy, Marie, thank you so much. We are counting down to the top of the hour and the close of polls.
That's right. Here we go with our 11 p.m. Eastern Time calls. Clock in New York, and the polls have just closed in 4 more states. We start in Washington, where Democratic incumbent Patty Murray has a lead over Republican challenger Tiffany Smiley. This has been a very closely watched race. A lot of late money coming in to try to save Patty Murray in this race. Tiffany Smiley has been seen as a very strong candidate for Republicans out there, so no call on that one as of yet.
In California, Democratic Senator Alex Padilla is projected to win his first full term, defeating Republican Mark Musser.
Let's go to Oregon, where we can project that Democratic Senator Ron Wyden has won his 5th term in office. He defeated candidate Jo Ray Perkins.
Idaho Republican Senator Mike Crapo has also retained his seat. As we look at the balance of power in the Senate now, and there are fewer white seats there, 45 to 44. Again, the majority is 51. Really, Republicans wanted to have the long shot win in Don Bolduc in New Hampshire, but they still have a path to the majority tonight.
In the Oregon governor's race, Tina Kotek is locked in a tight race with rival Christine Drazan. This is another area that Republicans have been looking to see if there can be an upset in Oregon. It's a 3-way race. There's also an independent candidate involved in this, so too close to call there.
We can project that Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom will easily win another term just 1 year after he survived a recall. And obviously, there's a lot of whispers about his possible ambitions after California governor, but we'll see.
Finally, in the Idaho governor's race, Republican incumbent Brad Little will prevail over Democrat Stephen Haidt. So, I think it's worth discussing the New Hampshire race and bringing in some of our guests on this. Dana, this is an area where there was a lot of enthusiasm for Republicans looking at Don Bolduc, that he was coming from behind, and he certainly had that kind of energy that sometimes you see exhibited by somebody who can close very well in a race. This is not even close.
So we had Governor Sununu, who just won his reelection in New Hampshire, on America's Newsroom yesterday. And he was very bullish. And he was, of course, I understand all politicians say, of course, we're going to win. But Chris Sununu, it was somebody who said, oh, yeah, he knows that state like the back of his hand. It's like, we're going to win this. So I think Republicans will have some soul searching to do here because, one, there was a primary where all the candidates got beat up on the Republican side, and Bolduc wins. And this was somebody who the Democrats wanted to win.
He was a Trump guy.
Yes.
He's a Trump guy. And isn't this the first race we've called involving a Trump-backed Senate candidate? I think it is.
Yes, and it's also somebody who the Democrats helped.
Yes.
They helped him win the primary, and then they got real nervous because Maggie Hassan looked like she might lose. Incumbents are hard to beat. The last 2% is very hard to get, but it seems that Bolduc even lost quite handily. And so some of that information is just not there. I was just thinking, too, about how a lot of questions are swirling about polling and about conservatives, Republicans maybe not being as responsive to pollsters as before. And I don't know the answer to that yet. I'll turn to the pollsters and they can explain all of what they see in that. But there's something going on that we have to figure out.
Yeah. We welcome back Josh Kraushaar, Katie Pavlich, Harold Ford Jr., and Ben Domenech. Mark Thiessen still with us. Josh, this was one where they started getting fired up about New Hampshire. But Maggie Hassan dug it out, and she was looking to be one of the most vulnerable senators on the board.
There are a lot of split-ticket voters in a lot of these races. New Hampshire's a big example where Governor Chris Sununu running up the score in the New Hampshire race and Don Bolduc losing a lot of support from a lot of Republicans by its very definition. Georgia, Governor Kemp running up the score against Stacey Abrams, but it's tight in the Senate race between Herschel Walker and Senator Warnock. I think two of the big success stories for Republicans tonight are Governor Kemp and Governor DeSantis. And what do they have in common? They've kept a little bit of distance from President Trump. And I think that's a storyline we're going to be hearing a lot more about in the coming days and weeks, especially as we look ahead to 2024. The two success stories are the ones that have created some space. And obviously DeSantis thinking about presidential politics, Governor Kemp, obviously the big clash over the 2020 election. But that's a pattern we're starting to see in the election results.
Well, although I'll say J.D. Vance is well positioned in Ohio, and we have other races to go. Katie?
Yeah, I mean, there's a big difference between an incumbent Democratic senator beating a newcoming Republican who doesn't have political experience and incumbent governors who are popular in their states like Florida and Georgia, where they've been able to prove themselves on a variety of issues, whether that was keeping their states open during COVID, bringing a handful of Republican New Yorkers from New York to Florida to bolster your numbers there. So, when you're coming out of a primary late and a bunch of people have run against you, Republicans in New Hampshire have a hard time getting their feet under them to make sure their candidate has the money. New Hampshire was a race earlier this year that they thought they could win. Then the polling fell behind. And then right at the end, the NRSC pumped in about $1 million, about 2 weeks, to see if they could get him over the edge. Clearly, it was too late for that. And so New Hampshire will not be on the board for Republicans tonight.
There you go. We have a couple more race calls. In the Iowa Senate race, Republican Chuck Grassley will retain his seat, defeating Democratic candidate Mike Franken. He's now the longest-serving senator in the Senate.
89.
89, and still, if you see his Instagram page, he's
one of my favorite people to follow on Instagram. He'll take a photo of his 50-year-old vacuum cleaner, and it has a name, and also, up and down with his tractor on the farm. It's good stuff.
I missed that post.
It's just on the polling on that race, they said that race was within 3, and is Grassley really in trouble?
Right.
But the Iowa Seltzer poll, that's almost always accurate. She said it would be about 11 points, and that looks like that's what he won by.
She was right.
We got more calls.
Fox News Decision Desk also projects that Louisiana Senator John Kennedy will win his win a majority in this race. I don't know if we have that one that we can get up on the screen, but it's a huge win.
John Kennedy
huge
from
win for
Louisiana
John
is
Kennedy.
going to win
Let's try again.
without a runoff. And John Kennedy is probably the senator with the best one-liners.
Absolutely, no doubt. Yes,
ever.
and he's
There is
running
no
away with it in Louisiana.
seat.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
He said it's riskier than sushi at a gas station. All right. Anyway, Republicans can also breathe a sigh of relief in Oklahoma. Our decision desk can project that incumbent Republican Governor Kevin Stitt will hold on for another term, defeating his Democratic rival Joy Hofmeister. You know, we bringing Harold Ford. There was some thought that Hofmeister might actually pull that out. Stitt wins this despite some controversies that he was facing, but Oklahoma is pretty red.
There's no doubt about it. But I will tell you, here we are, 11 p.m. East Coast time. Republicans have to be a little disappointed. They're going to likely win the House, but we talked about earlier.
Pretty sure, Harold.
But New Hampshire, right? I know, but let's just still the facts here. New Hampshire's gone Democrat. Pennsylvania doesn't look great. This thing could come down to Georgia, and we now got to wait for out west. Again, this is I call balls and strikes. At least I try my hardest to. I think it's been commented on here this evening that we are a divided country, closely divided country, and I think what the lesson parties have to understand from this, if you take the message too far to the left or too far to the right, you're going to get pushed back to the middle by voters. That's what I take from these numbers so far. We still got a long way to go in Nevada and Washington and Arizona and some of these other states. But I'm surprised by how close the Wisconsin race was with Mandela Barnes and Ron Johnson. It's not over yet, but it's a heck of a close race. And if what my sources are telling me in Pennsylvania is that it looks good for Fetterman at this point. So long night still in front of us. But at 11 p.m. on East Coast time, I thought the numbers would be a little better for Republicans than they've been so far.
There is a win in Virginia on that Kiggins race. She is declared the winner now in Virginia 2 over Elaine Luria, who was a member of the is a member, I should say, of the January 6th committee. Mark, your thoughts?
4 members of that committee now. Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, Stephanie Murphy, and now Luria are gone. Only one, well, Liz Cheney was defeated in the primary. Right. And 2 of them resigned.
Decided not to run again, yeah.
But the suggestion begins to grow that being on that committee was maybe.
Did Benny Thompson get reelected?
Pretty sure. Mark?
So just one point on what Harold was saying. So in Pennsylvania, Fetterman is looking good that we don't know. Wisconsin is tighter than we thought. North Carolina is tight. Ohio, J.D. Vance seems to be pulling away. That's because Mitch McConnell spent $32 million trying to save a seat in Ohio that Rob Portman won by 20 points. That is all Republican territory, currently held Republican territory. So in order to have the status quo ante, they have to run the table and win all 4 of those races. If they lose one of them, like in Pennsylvania, that means they have to pick one up in Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, New Hampshire now is off the table, Washington State, in order to keep a 50-50 Senate. So there's a huge opportunity cost because we spent $32 million to save that seat in Ohio. That is money that could have been spent in Arizona. That's money that could have been spent in New Hampshire. That's money that could have been spent in Washington State to try and help Tiffany Smiley with an upset. So there's a huge opportunity cost in picking these candidates who were running far behind the governors in their states, who were running by anywhere from 8 to 20 points. And because we had to spend that money, we're now looking at a possibility of keeping either a 50-50 Senate or maybe just barely missing or losing a seat. I mean, it's a lesson that the Republican Party is going to have to look at how this finally shapes out.
Hey, Bill, can we do a little what if?
We can try. I think a little risky.
Is it risky?
Well, I can screw it up.
No. Let's give it a shot. Let's give it a shot.
I tell you what we'll do, Brett. If you guys all play along, we'll do it.
Okay, let's go.
All right, so how many? 1, 2, 3, 4,
we got
5.
plenty.
Yeah, we got 10 of us. Okay. So let's.
So you know what we're doing? The what if Senate. You just did it verbally. I just wanted to see it visually.
It's like Candidate Casino, isn't it?
A little bit.
Okay, so here's our Senate what if. Okay. All right. 45-43 as it stands right now.
All right, let's say North Carolina goes to the Republicans.
That's right. And let's say Ohio goes to J.D. Vance.
Right.
I think some other news networks have called it. Okay, so we'll give it to J.D. Vance. I just looked at Wisconsin. The numbers in Dane County and Milwaukee are not as impressive as I think they need to be. So I think Ron Johnson gets reelected as it stands right now in Wisconsin, okay?
Alaska's going to be a Republican, by the way.
So all right, we'll go ahead and click that. Why don't we take Hawaii and make that a Dem? And then we are...
Louisiana.
All square so
Louisiana
far?
is
Louisiana.
called.
Okay, here we go. Boom. So now you're at 48, 46. A lot of things. Oh, hang on. Do we think Mike Lee wins Utah or not?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Okay. All right. You guys are doing well.
Yep.
All right. Hang on. We're not done yet. All right. So now you're at 49. Boy, this game just became very interesting, did it not?
Yeah, it did.
So why don't we go ahead and say
Nevada looks like even.
Do we want to do it?
Yes.
Okay. So now you're at 50.
Wait a second. They haven't even. What do you mean?
What do you mean?
Sorry.
Nevada, have they declared Nevada?
No. This is
What if Texas goes for us? What if Tennessee goes for the Democrats?
It is way too early for this absurdity.
What are we doing?
Brett, I told you.
Very nervous.
What if I was 6'7"?
Hang on.
It's 11, 12.
We're not at the bar. All right, hang on. I told you this was going to be a food
Let's
fight.
just keep
What
playing.
if?
Let's just keep playing.
Okay, so do we think? I just looked at Washington State. Tiffany Smiley's a terrific candidate. Patty Murray's had the seat since 1992. There's very little data in just yet. Could she win in Washington State? Yes.
Really?
Let's say Patty Murray, though, go ahead and hangs on, okay? So now you got Washington State. Okay, I was looking at Pennsylvania a moment ago, and some of these counties, like York County, I was just talking to Brian Yanis on the text, and Fetterman's the southern part of the state, right along the border there, and Fetterman's doing better than Oz is not doing as well as Trump did 2 years ago, okay?
When he lost the state.
Do we want to still go?
Right, he lost
Just
the
keep
state.
going.
Okay, all right, so let's...
We're going to make a call here in a minute.
Let's say Fetterman hangs on there in PA, okay? And that leaves Arizona and Georgia. And neither candidate in Georgia is at 50%. What do we think about Arizona? What does the team vote for now? Blake Masters or Mark Kelly?
So Arizona is a state where McConnell's PAC was not active, and it was because of an opportunity cost because they spent $32 million in Ohio.
All right, we got to wrap
that's
this
why
up.
That's why there wasn't money.
Let's put Arizona in the red, and then Georgia is what?
Georgia may go to a runoff on December 6th.
Okay, so there it is.
From today.
Control of the majority for
well
the
done,
Senate
Bill.
comes down to Georgia and Arizona.
You did a great job.
What'd you do with Arizona?
He made it red.
He made it red.
But we just did it for the what if. It's just what if. But
Hey, Brett, just officially, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and erase it.
But you know what? We do have something that you can fill in.
You can put in.
Okay.
Here we go. We are going to make
Here
a call.
comes our race call. Do we have an? There we have an animation.
And we can call. The Fox News Decision Desk can project that J.D. Vance will win the Senate race in Ohio, defeating Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan. This is a big win. It is a hold for Republicans, but one in which, to Mark Thiessen's point, they spent a lot of money and turned this race around from the beginning to the end. I personally think it was a very excellent town hall that
I think that had a lot
both
to
candidates
yes,
expressed
it
themselves.
was, yes, exactly, and that's why it was a tight race, and it was good that we got to hear from both of these candidates. We do have word that Tim Ryan has conceded in this race, and as has been said many times, he was one of the strongest Democrat Senate candidates out there. He really worked to distance himself from what he saw as some of the mistakes of the Biden administration, and he came up a little bit short tonight. It's also worth saying that in mid-October, J.D. Vance was underwater in Ohio.
Yeah.
And the money kept coming in, and there was a lot of, sort of back and forth between some of these big Republican PACs and Rick Scott's organization and who was going to put the money in there. But because Trump won Ohio by 8 points, and you see where Mike DeWine, the governor, is, there's just a lot of discussion in Republican circles about why it took $30 million to hold on to Ohio.
Former President Trump won Ohio twice by 8 points. Let's go out to Mark Meredith, who's standing by in the Vance campaign headquarters. Mark.
Brett and Martha, good evening to you. Well, this ballroom has not heard the news yet, so if you hear this eruption of applause, I would imagine that's going to be what it is. But Fox News can confirm exclusively first that Representative Tim Ryan has conceded this race to J.D. Vance, who will be the first-time politician now, the senator-elect of Ohio. This was certainly a race that garnered a lot of attention because, as you guys mentioned, Tim Ryan was running as a more moderate candidate. At least it was his appeal to a lot of these Ohio voters. J.D. Vance certainly new to this electorate, but but he won the support of the state's Republican establishment because of what happened after the primary, as well as the endorsement of former President Trump. That really vaulted Vance to the front of the pack here. We have been hearing from his campaign all night that they felt very confident about their chances, that they were not worried about Tim Ryan's early lead in this contest. Tim Ryan, though, will certainly be getting a lot of attention about what may come next for him. Remember, he ran as a presidential candidate in 2020. We asked him earlier in the week, kind of, what's next for you? And he said he simply didn't know, that he was putting it all out on the line. As for J.D. Vance, though, this will certainly be one of those more notable wins that we'll have seen tonight, because Brett and Martha, as you guys well know, there was a lot of money, time, and energy spent in Ohio by the Republican parties. They wanted to keep Senator Rob Portman's seat in their control. Senator Portman was here earlier tonight. He also made it clear he thought that Vance was going to have a good shot. We heard from so many voters out at the polling places today. They told us number one issue for them was the economy, that they were not that much worried about J.D. Vance's credentials. Brett and Martha, back to you guys.
Mark Meredith, live at Vance campaign headquarters, a very happy headquarters, and we have probably another happy headquarters to come.
We are starting to get more results, and this one is from Georgia, calling Brian Kemp, the continued governor, the incumbent governor, will be governor again in Georgia, 54% to 45%. There'll be a lot of questions raised about the future, the political future.
He gets over 50%.
Absolutely. He gets over 50%. Of course, right you are to make the point that he will not be going to a runoff, and we wait to see what happens in the Senate race and whether or not it will happen there. Enormous early vote that came in Georgia. 2.5 million votes came in early, and that was after this voting law passed in the state of Georgia that was called Jim Crow 2.0. Stacey Abrams talked about that a lot. In fact, on the stand just the other day, she said, don't try to get water or food online because Governor Kemp has forbidden you to have any of that while you're waiting in line to vote. But this is the outcome, a very big win for Brian Kemp.
As opposed to the last time, we just got word that Stacey Abrams has conceded. And she has conceded to Brian Kemp.
For both elections, or just for this one?
Wow. I feel like we should have a drum or something. Britt, you were going to say.
Well, I just think that his margin is important, because the question he's running, Herschel Walker's running about 4 or 5 points behind him. It was at least in polling, and that's what it's been looking like. So he comes in at 54, right? If that holds up, that gets Walker up to around 50. Possibly, if he can pull him that far, and that gives you an idea how tight that race is, and what the challenge that Walker has faced has been to try to get himself to 50 and above 50 and avoid a runoff, and above all, of course, win the race.
Yeah. So that 54, we know that it's going to be above 50, but we just don't know how high it's going to go. Ben Domenech, Stacey Abrams is another figure in Democratic politics, like Beto O'Rourke, who gets a lot of attention and a ton of money, and she is not winning races.
You see Tim Ryan, you see Stacey Abrams, you see Beto O'Rourke. Tim Ryan obviously is a quality candidate and has proven himself on the national stage, but Beto O'Rourke and Stacey Abrams have not. And what they have proven is that they can lose elections, and that they can waste a lot of money losing elections. On a night like this, when you have what I would describe as a disappointing performance from a number of different Republican Senate candidates, you wonder how much of that money that flowed into Stacey Abrams' coffers and into Beto O'Rourke's coffers could have been better used by Democrats in other states.
Harold Ford?
I don't disagree with Ben Narrett either. I will say this, that Libertarian candidate in Georgia, if you saw where Kemp was running ahead, he's running 2 or 3 times ahead. That could be the difference maker. But my sources in Georgia told me if he got to 54, that meant Walker might get to 50. So I think Britt's onto something there.
He's at 49.4 right now. Walker in this race, we have him at 49.1, and the Libertarian candidate at 70,000 votes, and they're about 25,000 apart.
Bill Hemmer, can we go back to Georgia?
Yeah, sure can. Just as you're saying that, okay, so you've got estimated to vote 85% is in, and Walker is shy of the 50% marker. Well, what I look at the difference here, guys. We're talking 4,400 votes between the two of them.
Do you remember when we didn't have the difference on the graphic?
Oh, man,
and
it
you
was
and I were
ugly.
doing math.
Oh, gosh.
6, 7, carry the naught.
It was UGLY. It had no alibi.
No math required.
It was just ugly. I would direct the audience to these 16 metro counties that surround Atlanta. And as we do that, here's what I would say. It's rudimentary analysis right now. If our estimated vote-in is 85% statewide, just keep your eye. Let's see if I can do this, okay? Let me try it again one more time here. Just keep your eye right there. And let's go into, I couldn't do it, I apologize. But you watch this number here. Oh, that's Fulton County. That is a healthy dose of votes out of Fulton County, largest county in the state, okay? Let's pop around here. Cobb, you're at 95. Gwinnett, not even quite half. All right. DeKalb, 3/4. What do we hear south of Atlanta? Clayton's almost all the way in. Fayette's at 80%. Henry County is almost all the way in. You see how this is coming in here now? Rockdale, 99. Newton is 93. Did I check this one? Yeah, Gwinnett, 48. We'll come back to that one with Warnock. The point being, sorry.
Where's Athens?
I'm going to show you that in 1 second. If Warnock is going to be able to pull this out and get over 50%, a lot of those votes from the surrounding counties, it's not a lot of vote that's still out there for a state this large right now. A lot of it's been accounted for. If you were to come east of Atlanta, Brett, right? See this little blue island out here? That is Clark County, spelled with an E. That is Athens. That's the University of Georgia. 40 years ago this year, Herschel Walker won the Heisman Trophy. And 40 years later, he's not going to win the county in which he played football at Georgia. But you can bet a lot of this Georgia red out here is going for Walker.
What does it look like in terms of how much of that is in and how much is not in those red areas?
I mean, I could pop around, Britt, and it might be an interesting. Clark County's at almost 100%. Again, those numbers can change too.
Does your purple work?
Yeah, great call. Okay, here we go. So most of this, as I look at it here, is surrounding this Atlanta area here. And then you got a few others down here in the south. I would say, let's take this. Walton County appeared to me to be a county where the purple was more vibrant. So you got a lot of vote out there right now, okay? It appears to be a Walker County. President Trump 2 years ago, well, look what he did in Walton County, okay? So you've got some vote out there for Herschel Walker. Let me come out here and go back to our purple. What do you see on here? I see a few down here. I see one right along the border here with South Carolina. See what that is. That's Columbia County. Wow, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Walker's at 68%. Trump was in that county. He was, okay, so an overperformance now in this part of the state for Herschel Walker. So I would say right now that this race is too close to call. I mean,
Why didn't you say so?
I did not know that was going to go to 49.0.
Wow.
Boom. There you go.
Very interesting.
Our difference now is 1,345 votes. And we are getting to the point where, as our very graphic what-if scenario showed us, the control of the U.S. Senate is still very much in play with a number of states, both out west and in Georgia.
Can I ask
We'll do this
one,
again shortly.
Bill,
Go ahead.
Can you pull up New York 17 and take a look at how Maloney is
great
faring?
one, Martha.
This is like an ordering at a restaurant.
I would like with the sauce on the side, please.
And a glass of wine,
And the
please.
California roll.
No, Mark, don't order the sushi. Great question, Martha. Really good. This is New York 17 here. Okay, so you're just north of New York City or Hudson Valley.
Wow.
This
gonna win.
Right, exactly. It looks like Mike Lawler turned out to be a real good candidate.
Yep.
And Sean Patrick Maloney's down by about 10 points with about 70% of the vote counted. I tell you, what I find interesting, if you move up the Hudson Valley here, you go up to New York 18, look what you're seeing here. All right, Pat Ryan is just hanging on over Colin Schmidt. Both these guys are veterans. Pat Ryan ran in that special election back in August. They like this candidate a lot. And I would just say, before we get to a couple more race calls, this is New York 19. Mark Molinaro has just taken the lead over Riley. Molinaro was the one who lost to Pat Ryan just about 3 months ago. Get some race calls right now, sir.
Thank you.
You bet.
So we can project that Michigan Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer will prevail over Republican Tudor Dixon in that Michigan race. Very closely watched. Dixon was able to close the gap there towards the end, but Whitmer has pulled out another term as governor of Michigan.
We can also project that New York Governor Kathy Hochul will win her first full term in office, defeating Republican House Congressman Lee Zeldin. Now, this race, you couldn't, project at the beginning that it was going to be as close as it was. There were Democrats in this state that were saying this is a done deal and Zeldin was going to win. But Kathy Hochul pulls it out. I will point out that she brought in every luminary in the Democratic Party, including former President Obama, former President Clinton, Secretary Clinton, the whole panoply.
Brett, I just keep wondering what the Florida effect might have been on Lee Zeldin. A lot of people moved out of New York City, and he had to get at least 30%, I think 1.4 million votes in New York City, and that may have been where he fell short. I think we lost 50,000 residents in New York City in August alone, and it'll be interesting to see if some of the explosion that we saw in Florida is partly people who are disgruntled and left New York.
We'll talk about that in a second, but
we're also calling the Nebraska governor's race for Republican Jim Pillen in that one.
So, Dana, what about that New York race? And I mean, we covered it very closely. The issue of crime obviously moved the needle, not enough to get Zeldin over the top, but might get some of these New York congressmen or New York House races.
Yeah, so I have a good friend who works on Democratic House races who told me that they truly believe that they were going to lose all of the Long Island races and these Hudson Valley races as well. Be interesting to see what happens with Colin Schmitt and Pat Ryan. Pat Ryan considered one of the best Democratic candidates that's been out there, but Colin Schmitt right on his heels. The other thing is Lee Zeldin he finally was able to get media attention for a really big issue in New York, especially New York City, and that is crime in the city. And part of what you see in Long Island and the Hudson Valley is that they come into New York to work. And their children come here to work, or their children are living here, and they're upset about it and they're worried. A little bit of a shame, I think, for Lee Zeldin that he gave it that much of a shot. Now, there is a Senate race in a couple of years, I believe, in New York. I think I have that right. He's shown that he can at least get a foothold. He had never run in a statewide race before. Maybe he will try to give it another shot. There was one other race in New York that Bill was showing me because I like this candidate up there, LaRon Singletary. New York 25, this is at Rochester, one of the highest crime rates in New York State. Former police chief. One of the things that was pretty interesting over the weekend is he got a refugee group to go out and canvass for him. They had never voted for a Republican before, but they're worried about crime, and they want their kids to be better educated.
And he's leading by 3,369.
It's a really interesting race. Former police chief, exactly right.
Yep.
He got run out during 2020.
Yep.
In custody of some police officers in Rochester. One of the suspects was asphyxiated, and the police chief lost his job for it. He's coming back to gain his reputation back. Yeah. Rochester's homicide rate hit an all-time record this past year.
Josh Kraushaar, those are two big governor's wins, though, for Democrats, Gretchen Whitmer and Kathy Hochul.
A big governor's win in both those states. But I do want to point to New York being a rare bright spot for Republicans because Lee Zeldin may not win the governor's race, but he's keeping it close enough, and he's capitalizing, as Dana said, on a very pertinent issue of crime. And then New York City and Rochester and Buffalo, there are a lot of House races, including that of the House Campaign Committee chairman, that Democrats hold that are in danger right now. So if Republicans get the House, and it's been a little bit disappointing for House Republicans right now, but the margin may end up being in New York State, where a lot of Republicans are doing quite well.
Great point.
Okay, from the White House, we can say that the president made these congratulatory calls. He tweeted out a shot of him on the phone, calling a number of different races, a number of different candidates, and finished with, "If you're in line to vote, remember, stay in line," from President Biden. So with that, Britt, do you have any thoughts at this point in the night?
Well, we haven't called North Carolina, right?
We have not as of
And,
yet.
and we can in our what if scenario, we counted that as red, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bud leads by 4 points.
Yeah, that looks pretty good, I think, down there for Bud in North Carolina.
Yep.
We do have another governor call in Minnesota. Tim Walz will win that. Another big win for Democrats. This was more projected from the beginning, but Tim Walz will beat the Republican Jensen in that race from Minnesota. So the governor's races, there are a number of them, obviously, out west that Republicans are looking for, including Arizona with Kari Lake. And there is a lot coming in as far as raw vote total, but those are all too early to call.
Yep, waiting for Oregon as well, which has been an interesting race to watch. So the night is far from over. We are counting down to our next poll closing as the balance of power in Washington takes shape before our eyes. Fox News Democracy 22 continues right after this break. Stay with us.
What if? Welcome back to Democracy 2022, 11:35 on the East Coast. We have some races too close to call. If you didn't think it was too close to call, 49.0 to 49.0 is pretty amazing, with a difference of 756 votes in the state of Georgia. We've already called the governor's race there. Governor Kemp, we expect him to come out and speak to his supporters. We'll take you there when he does. But his spread much bigger over Stacey Abrams, and we will see. There's a number of pockets of vote still left in Georgia that could come in, and we'll get wonky on that in just a minute.
It's going to take a while to get an answer in Pennsylvania as well, but here's how it stacks up right now, 48 to 49, with Fetterman in the lead at this moment, and 76% of that vote in. And as we told you, that is all mail-in first, and then they start counting the day of.
Okay, let's go on to Arizona. In the Senate race there, we are at 48% in, and there is a lead for incumbent Senator Mark Kelly. Again, that's also early vote. Day of is going to be coming in, we expect, soon, but that's the spread as of now.
Nevada Senate, let's take a look at this one, which would be a pickup for Republicans if they can win it. So far, we've only seen holds in these Senate races for the red team. This is Cortez Masto and Laxalt, too close to call.
At 0%. North Carolina Senate.
It's 0 to 0
It's
in
0 to
Nevada.
95% in, and this is, I think, a race that is going to be called soon with Ted Budd moving ahead. This would be a hold for Republicans, but it seems like it's getting close. We just haven't made a call yet. They're looking for some extra raw vote total, but it could be getting close at any time. We're going to take you to Ohio.
Let's go to Ohio, where J.D. Vance, who will be the next senator from Ohio, and then we'll get you back to that Arizona governor's race, which you can see there. But here's Mr. Vance at the podium on a good night for him. Let's watch.
I believe I'm the last thing standing between you all and a very, very fun night of celebration. So I'll try to keep my remarks pretty brief here. The first thing I got to say is just, I am overwhelmed with gratitude. Really, I cannot say thank you enough. I cannot express possibly in words how grateful I am, first to the people on this stage with me. And I just want to say, you can't do this without your family's support, and especially my beautiful wife, Lucia. Thank you so much. So much for letting me do this. And the great thing about having 3 young children, we have a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 10-month-old. They're upstairs asleep. They have no idea what the hell is going on. I want to thank my family. It's so great to have everybody here. Mom, Aunt Wee, everybody, Lindsay. I won't go through the entire list here, but Uncle Jimmy, Aunt Donna. It's funny. My family helps keep me grounded as we were walking down here. My aunt said to my uncle, "Aren't you glad that he won? That would have been a terrible ride home, right?" That's what we're thinking here in the Vance family. We're staying on top of the important stuff. I could not have done this. Could not have won this race. Could not have had what we have here tonight. I mean, look, the governor and the lieutenant governor crushed it. Every other statewide office crushed it. I'm so grateful to Mike DeWine and John Houston. I'm so grateful to Bob Paduchik for helping us cobble together a unified Republican team, and we won big, ladies and gentlemen. What an incredible thing. Oh, my Lord. And I got to say, of course, I had so much fun going around campaigning with all the statewide officials.
J.D. Vance came to prominence as the author of Hillbilly Elegy and leveraged that popularity into a Senate win in Ohio tonight. He is thanking all of his supporters in his home state. Let's go over to Georgia, where the governor there, Brian Kemp, is also accepting a win tonight. Let's watch.
Who are here. Thank you, guys, and congratulations. I know you all have worked incredibly hard over the last few months, and I look forward to working with each of you over the next 4 years to keep our state moving in the right direction. And all the hard-working Georgians across the state who came out to our bus stops, our rallies, our meet and greets, those who helped Lucy fill up our diesel fuel can. You remember at the bus stop when Lucy was holding the diesel fuel can, and we told you at those stops all across this state, we got all the money we need. It's just in your pocket. And I appreciate y'all supporting the girls with your contributions, but also just appreciate the strong grassroots supporters that we've had literally from Claxton to Calhoun. And finally, I just want to thank the campaign staff and our official staff for all the wood that they have chopped over the last several months. We love y'all. As you all know, we did not get distracted on this hard-fought campaign. Just like we have stayed focused on putting you first throughout my first term. We woke up every single day talking about how to build a safer, stronger Georgia for you and your family, and help your family fight through Joe Biden's 40-year high inflation. And we did that by focusing on common sense solutions to put more of your hard-earned tax dollars back in your pocket, like passing the largest state income tax cut in history, returning over $1 billion back to you, the taxpayers, and suspending the gas tax in this state since March. And we are not about to stop there. Come January 2023, we're going to send another $1 billion back to the taxpayers. And we're also going to give you relief on your property taxes as well. But we also focused on how resilient Georgia's economy has been despite the disaster we're seeing in Washington, D.C. and across the country thanks to Joe Biden. But in Georgia, that's right. But in Georgia, we have record low unemployment. The most people ever working in the history of our state. Historic investment in rural Georgia. And the 2 largest job projects in state history were announced just in the last year. But this campaign was also about keeping you and your families safe, and by backing our men and women in law enforcement.
Georgia Governor Brian Kemp winning re-election with bigger spread here, and he is obviously in the wake of the change of the voter law in Georgia that was called Jim Crow 2.0, not only by Stacey Abrams, but by President Biden. More people voted early than ever before, and the numbers were up in Georgia. But he goes on to cruise to victory. Also, someone as a governor who opened up his state quickly after COVID. We want to head back to Harris Faulkner and her group of voters. Harris.
Yes, voters' voices. Real quickly, we had quite the discussion, Lee Carter and I, our pollster on board tonight, with our audience about education. And it got a little chippy. We're going to go to Chris now. And Chris, first of all, tell us where you're from and then take it away. I know you're an educator.
Okay, so from Jersey Shore area and Bayshore area, and I am a teacher of social studies. I teach high school students. And when I teach, I like to utilize the Constitution and carry it with me, primary source documents, and you know, we've been seeing a lot of patterns in New Jersey, especially with parents getting more involved in education and in how their students are educated. It's actually been going on for a while in New Jersey.
So, Chris, I'm going to step in. And
Sure.
Bernice, would you like to pick up here? Because you guys were going at it a little while ago.
Yes, well, earlier we were discussing about what should be taught. And there's a lot of hoopla about teaching critical race theory. We were talking about parental involvement in education. And what I said is that we should teach the truth. And we should not teach history because some people may feel uncomfortable with it. And that's when Chris and I had gotten into an exchange.
Chris, you want a last word?
Sure. Well, you know, when you teach the truth, you teach both sides, you teach it fairly. You want to make everybody feel welcoming in the classroom. You don't want to make anybody feel excluded, because that exclusion, when you try to be inclusive, you're being exclusive. And
Guys,
that
oh boy,
inclusion-
and I knew that somebody would pipe up on this.
This is what
All right, we're going to wrap it up. You guys, thank you.
Worried about how black children and brown children have felt excluded and not part of that conversation. But now, when we're starting to talk about teaching the truth of history, we have to worry about feelings.
I do want to point out that while this conversation has been going on pretty much as a backdrop tonight on education, it is a hot one. We saw Governor Glenn Youngkin on with Brett and Martha earlier. This will be an issue that persists long beyond this midterm election. I know it's popped up in your research too.
No doubt
So guys,
about it.
thank you for your transparency. I know it's not always easy to sit next to each other and have, you know, disagreements, but we really appreciate it. And it's been a joy to have you guys in studio tonight. Thank you to all of our voters for being with us and having these very important conversations. We wanted to pull back the veil a little bit so they could see what it was like while we were here behind the scenes, as well as what everybody got to enjoy on the screen as well. What we saw tonight, the issues that will shape our families and our communities and our nation for the next 2 years and beyond. Thank you to Lee Carter and for all of your excellent insights and the work that you do on polling viewers as well. And thank you for watching. Our coverage continues well into the night, so keep it right here on the Fox News Channel. Now back to Brett and Martha.
Harris, nice job. Thanks to everybody in studio there. Really fascinating conversations.
Yeah, thank you very much, Harris, and all of the group in there, the viewers who joined us tonight. Let's bring back our panel and see where they're thinking at this point. Carl, you know, when you look at some of the numbers that are projected right now for the House, it is not what was anticipated and not what Republicans had hoped so far.
It looks like it's going to be closer to 20 than 30, and that, you know, that's a reasonable number for this year, given that they picked up 14 seats last time around. But so far, not meeting the expectations of a lot of people that this was going to be a gigantic wave on the nature of 1994 or 2010. But, you know, in a way, it was never going to be, because we had a head start. There's a natural ceiling to the number of members that either party can have in Congress. The Republicans reached their modern high with 247, I think it is, in 2014, and redistricting changed the dynamic of that, so we could never get to 240. We're going to get to somewhere in the 230s.
Do you think there's a path, what you're seeing, to Senate control?
Yeah, but it's, you know, we've got a couple of very tough races here, and one that's likely to end up with a December 6th runoff in Georgia. So, yes. But right now, Republicans are, you know, they were hoping for a clear and convincing win in Pennsylvania, which makes everything easy. On the other hand, it looks like they're on their way to a very strong showing in Nevada and frankly, we've held up better in Georgia than I would have thought, given the nature there. One thing that's
we need
important.
the board.
Yeah, one thing is J.D. Vance did a smart thing by starting off his list of thank yous by thanking Governor Mike DeWine. Think about this. Mike DeWine runs for re-election and wins by a 25.8% margin, and J.D. Vance wins by 7 points. That was the top of the ticket. Well, if we're taking a look at it in Georgia, there's a good reason why Herschel Walker is in the hunt, and it's because Brian Kemp is winning by a substantial margin. I suspect we're likely to see the same kind of thing play out in Nevada. We saw the opposite in Pennsylvania, where the governor's candidate was a drag at the top of the ticket. We don't know what the outcome there is yet, but it's clear that it helps to have a popular governor running for office. Saw it in Florida, even when Marco Rubio, who's been there for several terms, has a well-defined image and comes from Miami-Dade. That was his political strength area to begin with when he ran the first time, and again for re-election. But nonetheless, this time around, having DeSantis at the top of the ticket, I mean, every statewide office in Florida today is Republican. They flipped the last remaining Democrat, the Ag Commissioner's office, and they now have a super majority in both houses of the legislature and picked up 4 seats, added 4 seats to the Republican U.S. House numbers.
So that's the story for Republicans. By the way, we can get you a black Sharpie. It's
I'm into the color thing. I couldn't get the red one out.
Okay.
Someone's been playing in my bag. I don't know.
Thoughts. I thought that political conditions were such that would suggest a red wave. The polling said otherwise, and I was skeptical of the polling. The polling's held up pretty well tonight.
Yep.
No, they call these races close. They've turned out to be close one way or the other, certainly within the margins of error. But the polling's held up pretty well. One other thing was the Trump-backed candidates. So far, it's 1-1. He lost Trump-backed Bolduc, the Senate candidates I'm talking about. Trump-backed Bolduc, he lost. He backed J.D. Vance, and he's won. It looks like Ted Budd, another Trump-backed candidate, who's also had other support. I mean, he wasn't a maverick candidate, will probably win in North Carolina. So we'll see how that plays out at the end of the night and what effect that. One other thing about the outcome of this election. There are 2 effects of an election like this. One is the political effect. Did you beat expectations? What momentum did you have? Do Democrats feel good? Does Biden get a big message out of this? The other is the practical effect. The practical effect is Republicans get control of the House of Representatives. His legislative agenda cannot be the kind of legislative agenda he had for the last 2 years, because it will go nowhere in the House of Representatives, and it won't matter who controls the Senate. That's the practical effect. But the political effect, I think, is likely to be a lot milder for him. Will this encourage him to run again? Hey, I came out unscathed. I don't look like the guy that dragged my party down to some terrible defeat. I'm good to go. So that's a part of this. Be interesting to see the message he takes.
One other thing I wanted to ask Dana about is, we heard about this when we looked at the Fox News voter analysis, which was that there was this basket of other issues that people were concerned about. Abortion, one of them, climate change, things along those lines. And I'm wondering if there was some split ticket voting here, as people going in and saying, top line here, this is what I care about, inflation, economy, but over here, I'm going to make sure that these things get held on to and cared about as well.
So just this morning, we had you on America's Newsroom talking about soccer moms, right? And what I think is going to be curious, I'm wanting to learn more about it, is that you saw that big swing of independent women, or suburban women, go like 17 points from August with the Democrats, and then they swung over to the Republicans by 70 points by mid-September. I thought that was maybe a little bit about the schools, getting kids back to school and how expensive everything was. The cost of gas continued to go up, and affordability was a really big issue. But there's something going on here. Republicans definitely did not have a hold on independent voters like they thought they would. And is that a hangover from 2020? And was abortion a bigger issue for some of them than we realized? And was it in the northeast suburbs in particular? In New Hampshire, it's 70-30 pro-choice. So that might have also had a factor.
Yeah. So quickly, Jessica, we welcome you back to the panel.
Thank you.
Only had 20 seconds, but the president tomorrow, how does he deal with this?
I'm sure that he will be incredibly gracious. I imagine it will be a return to the tone after winning in 2020 to say, I'm president for all of you. And the last few months on the campaign trail, I've heard you loud and clear. And I appreciate the fact that you continue to support Democrats, but I know that you're not wholly happy with the way that we've been governing, and we'll make the next 2 years a little bit different. But it's a landscape that I did not expect, and I just want to say...
Hold on. Can I come back?
Hold that thought.
Keep it here.
Be right back.
Welcome back. We are almost to midnight on the East Coast, and we're getting more raw vote total in. Some of the closest races will be able to kind of move the needle, but they are very close and could go either way in these Senate races. We're tracking a number of House races. So far, you know, the spread that you look at, you try to model these things as we get the raw vote total in. It started the night that they could be up to 30 or 35. I think as the night has gone on, our projections are continuing to narrow. So you're in a 20-seat kind of range. But we can't make that call yet, but it appears very clear that the House is going to go to the GOP. We'll bring Bill Hemmer in to look at a couple of specific races.
Yep. I'll give you some good news for Democrats. I'll give you some good news for Republicans. The good news for Democrats is in Pennsylvania. This is the northeastern corner of the state. This is your swing area. And we've seen it go back and forth, election after election. You know, you're at 77% of the vote in. Susan Wild is hanging on over Lisa Scheller. Lisa Scheller was a good candidate. She was a heroin addict as a teenager. She overcame that, became a successful businesswoman, ran against Wild 2 years ago and lost. This was a rematch, and right now she's not at the mark where she needs to be in order to win that race. Pennsylvania 8, very similar story. Matt Cartwright against Jim Bognett. Okay, this was a race that happened 2 years ago. This again is a rematch. Bognett told us last week on our show, Dana, he said he went to bed at midnight in 2020. He was up 10,000 votes. The next day at noon, he was down 13,000 and lost. In this case, Bognett was trying to win the seat, and right now he trails by 5 points. That has to be a big disappointment of Republicans in Pennsylvania because they saw political opportunity, especially in that part of the state. On the converse of all this, I will take you out to Michigan. This is the most expensive House race on the board this year. This is Alyssa Slotkin, the Democrat, against Tom Barrett, good candidate as a Republican. She has been a fighter. She has bucked her party, done it publicly. She won first in 2018 as an intelligence background, Intel in Washington, D.C., won again in 2020. But this right now, this would be a pickoff for Kevin McCarthy and Republicans if they're able to hang on to this. And I'll just show you this one, too. Dan Kildee, Democrat, Flint, Michigan, given a pretty good run for his money by Paul Young right now, just in that area just north and east of where Slotkin's district is. So you can point to some tough news for Republicans in Pennsylvania right now, and you can also look at this right now in Michigan and think, well, you're doing a pretty good job right now of getting your voters out. So just a sample of what we're seeing.